A system interface displays that only one barbarian remains against thousands of demons, while he is held fast by a powerful restraint spell. The warrior is also struck by curses of silence and weakness, designed specifically to strip away every last bit of his physical defense. A terrifying amputation spell is conjured to rip each of his limbs from his body right in front of a massive, shadowy foe. He suffers the instant death curse, a move reserved for only the strongest demons, and loses the arm holding his sword. An armored demon walks calmly toward the warrior's body, which lies broken on the ground following the barrage of attacks. The terrifying creature with horns and white hair smiles in triumph, believing he has finally defeated his great opponent. He turns to leave, thinking it is all over, but the barbarian refuses to give up, even in such a dire state. The demon is completely shocked to find the warrior back on his feet, right behind him, ready for another round. The MC explains that he only managed to stand against this entire army alone because he made a special pact with the angels. He gained the ability to understand every existing language thanks to a blessing bestowed upon him by the Archangel Seraphim. A floating skeletal creature calls the MC crazy and ignorant for challenging the forces of evil in such a way. Wolfgang stares down the floating opponent, dismissively questioning the insults about him being some mindless, ignorant fool. The giant skull asks how a normal human could declare war on the demons, but Wolfgang simply readies his hammer. The barbarian charges forward with a heavy stomp, showing that he feels absolutely no fear toward the terrible opponent before him. Wolfgang leaps toward the giant skull and ironically agrees with the words the monster spoke before the assault. He crushes his enemy without mercy, revealing that he lost his sanity long ago thanks to the demons themselves. The demon counter continues to drop drastically thanks to the immense arsenal of divine techniques he has received. Wolfgang recalls that the angels spared no effort to fully support his grueling, solitary journey of vengeance. In the heat of battle, the warrior is caught head-on by the lethal strike of a hooded enemy. The demon tells the barbarian to just give up, while the warrior begins to reveal his most useful power. The blessing of the fallen angel Uriel grants Wolfgang an incredible healing ability that instantly regenerates his body. The enemy is terrified to see that even a decapitation would be solved by a new head growing back in its place. With a chilling smile, Wolfgang warns his opponent that he will make sure to beat him to a pulp using only his bare hands. The immortal barbarian begins to slaughter every demon that crosses his path in a violent and relentless fashion. Faced with such overwhelming force, the enemies begin to seriously question who the real monster is here. The terrified demon realizes too late that he should have never crossed paths with such a relentless warrior. More than 10,000 demons gather in one spot to try and contain the barbarian warrior's devastating advance. They have prepared a cursed temple built specifically to sever the powerful connection he has with the divine. Knowing full well it is a trap, Wolfgang walks right into it and is promptly struck by an arrow in the chest. He rips the arrow out without hesitation, remembering that this confrontation was the only reason he accepted this war. Before him appears the evil creature responsible for taking the lives of his beloved family in the past. The demon smiles sadistically, revealing that this temple was the perfect hideout to stay hidden from the warrior. The MC realizes that the plan to lure him there was orchestrated by the very person who murdered his family. A rain of lethal arrows is fired rapidly at Wolfgang to try and take him down for good. The projectiles strike the hero's chest with extreme force, but he refuses to retreat even a single step. The barbarian admits that the enemy's strategy worked perfectly by leaving him vulnerable and without healing in that place. Without the angel's regenerative power, the demon gloats, calling him nothing but a weak and defenseless human. Wolfgang flashes a confident smile and says the opponent forgot one crucial detail and is talking far too much. The demon becomes extremely irritated by the barbarian's audacity and shouts, calling the warrior savage trash. Consumed by hatred, the enemy leader orders all his forces to attack at once to crush the barbarian once and for all. Wolfgang just smiles, saying they should have done that sooner, and begins to reveal his second great secret. An overwhelming green energy envelops the barbarian, showing that he has completely surpassed all human limits. He advances like a true hurricane, cutting demons demons in half with unbelievable speed and strength. The warrior raises his greatsword, infused with power, proving he is capable of annihilating an entire army on his own. A massive explosion of energy sweeps through the area, leaving only the barbarian and the demon leader alive in the ruined temple. The last surviving demon falls into despair upon seeing his entire army annihilated by just one man. Tired of hearing the same dramatic excuses from his enemies, Wolfgang points his sword to deliver the final blow. With his vengeance finally achieved, the barbarian plans to return in peace to his beloved homeland of Germania. He drives his blade in to seal the monster's fate and promises to rebuild the world that had been destroyed by the darkness. Freed from the burden of revenge, he wishes to return to exploring the seas and living new adventures as the free barbarian he always was. The cornered demon refuses defeat and shouts that his race will never be destroyed by someone like the barbarian. Suddenly, the enemy leader strikes himself to activate one last desperate forbidden spell as a final trump card. Wolfgang calmly asks if taking his own life will somehow change the dark fate of his race. The barbarian raises his giant blade, warning that he will never allow the monster to end his life before his vengeance is complete. The demon successfully conjures an ancient forbidden curse capable of instantly petrifying his terrible opponent. Wolfgang watches a golden magic circle glow beneath his feet and wonders, startled, what is happening to him. The warrior panics as he realizes his powerful body is slowly turning into a stone statue. On the celestial plane, the angels who supported the hero fall into complete despair upon witnessing the terrifying magic. The MC realizes he has completely lost all sensitivity and can no longer hear a single sound around him. With his vision blurring, the warrior tries to resist, so as not to let his family's murderer escape. After thinking of his family, he loses consciousness, and the scene shifts to a very surprised young man in the present day, standing before a statue. A young man admires the stone monument of Wolfgang in a tourist cave, thinking the sculpture looks truly alive. Wolfgang somehow realizes he can see and hear the voice of this strange, modern man clearly. A tour guide calls the attention of the curious young man, telling him not to wander away from the rest of the group. The stone statue's hand begins to move suddenly, indicating that the spell's effect has finally begun to break. The barbarian wakes from his long stone slumber and grabs the head of the distracted, young tourist firmly. Wolfgang coldly orders the kid to get out of his way while displaying his recovered, enormous physical strength. He simply tosses the young man against the stone wall of the cave without showing any hesitation. The tour guide and the other visitors begin to scream in terror at seeing the statue come to life before their eyes. The warrior cracks his neck while beginning to stretch to fully recover his muscle mobility. He grumbles, annoyed, saying that this unknown place is too loud and full of irritating humans. With his body completely free, Wolfgang swears he will hunt the demon leader down once and for all to finish him. He decides to open his golden status window to check his information and skills after being petrified for so long. The barbarian's eyes widen at the absurd information presented on his glowing system screen. He focuses his vision on the incredible numbers, which show a reality completely different from the one he knew. The screen shows the number of demons has increased to almost 1 million, and now there are hunters scattered around the world. The warrior is extremely confused, wondering what these hunters the system mentions could be. He realizes with sadness that counter for surviving barbarians still shows only one active person in the world. His expression hardens, showing he is ready to deal with the new threats of this mysterious world. The MC finds himself surrounded by modern men wearing black suits, with glowing marks around their bodies. Wolfgang wonders if all this chaos is happening just because he threw one simple, weak human. He notices that the young man thrown against the wall fainted easily and thinks all these loud men are incredibly weak. One of the men in a suit approaches without fear and introduces himself as a dungeon guard affiliated with a famous guild. He shows a modern hunter ID card and authoritatively demands the barbarian's documents. Wolfgang doesn't understand the request for identification while the guard tries to intimidate the warrior with threats of containment. The barbarian responds to the provocation by grabbing the insolent guard's neck with just one of his massive hands. He lifts the man easily into the air, leaving the other dungeon guards completely terrified by the scene. Wolfgang warns coldly that no living creature is capable of controlling him and tells the guard to pay close attention. The man in the suit tries to beg for his life, desperately while being choked by the barbarian's monstrous strength. At that moment, a young redhead appears, running and out of breath, asking if he is the famous Wolfgang. The hero drops the gasping guard to the ground the moment he decides to focus his attention on the mysterious girl. He stares at the newcomer with suspicion and demands to know immediately how she discovered his real name. The barbarian stands imposingly in front of the young woman, while the defeated guard continues coughing on the floor. The girl is a bit intimidated by the barbarian's huge presence, but tries to take a deep breath to continue the conversation. She introduces herself as Kang Yurin from the Hunter Association and suggests moving to a better place to talk. Before the MC can refuse, his stomach starts growling very loudly due to his long fast. Realizing the situation, the friendly young woman smiles and promises to provide plenty of food and a comfortable place for him. Wolfgang accepts the offer, which he cannot refuse, and walks through a glowing blue teleportation portal with the girl. They emerge in the middle of a modern metropolis full of buildings, and the barbarian is fascinated by the changes in the world. Yurin explains that she is taking the warrior to the Association of Hunters who deal with threats coming from portals. Yurin explains that government agencies handle high-level threats while they focus on lower-level monsters. She reveals that he was part of a project to discover new hunters, leaving Wolfgang quite surprised. As they exit the car, she tells him that everyone thought he was just a common statue petrified by a curse. The barbarian listens attentively while walking through the immense headquarters of the association, filled with high-ranking hunters. Yurin looks at his reflection in the elevator and confesses that she had a brilliant idea when she found him in that state. The warrior notices the young woman's sudden silence and wonders silently why she stopped talking out of nowhere. The girl seems to harbor deep concern while she continues to guide the imposing barbarian through the huge building. Wolfgang begins to sniff with great curiosity a hot and mysterious box pizza placed right in front of him. Yurin presents the dish as pizza and encourages the famished warrior to eat to recover his lost strength. She explains that they used healing hunters to try to break the petrification, but the demon's curse was too strong. Wolfgang devours the food, finding it delicious, and curses the humans for being able to make something so tasty. With his mouth full, he points curiously at a dark soda bottle, wanting to know what it is. The young woman opens the bottle of cola and says the flavor is even better if he drinks it while eating the pizza. The barbarian flips the entire bottle at once, demonstrating his enormous thirst with that unknown carbonated drink. Yurin waits anxiously for the hero's reaction and asks, with a bit of fear, if he truly liked the taste. Wolfgang admits he felt a strange shock in his throat, but found the cold drink extremely tasty and refreshing. Relieved to see that she pleased the warrior's exotic palate, she wipes sweat from her forehead and asks him to continue eating. The girl takes the moment to ask if he has noticed that the current era is totally different from his time. Wolfgang confirms, saying that everything he saw through the window of that vehicle seemed completely strange and bizarre. Yurin explains the concept of centuries and asks if he remembers what exact year he was alive in before being petrified. The hero is quite confused by modern historical terms and confesses that he has no idea what that means. He recalls only that he was born in the era when 1,000 years had passed since the legendary founding of Rome by Romulus. The young woman jumps up from the table, shouting enthusiastically that her scientific theory was totally correct. She reveals, radiant, that Wolfgang came directly from the ancient period and that they are now living in the 21st century. As an archaeologist hunter, she is extremely thrilled to be talking face to face with a living legend from the past. The barbarian ignores all the girl's scientific excitement and impatiently asks her to bring another box of pizza immediately. After devouring several pizzas in a row, he finally feels satisfied and observes the huge pile of empty boxes. Wolfgang asks if she knows where to find the terrible demon called Devil House that caused all his misfortune. He explains, serious, that this was the cursed monster responsible for turning him into a stone statue in the past. The girl asks for a moment to search for the monster's name on an information app exclusive to hunters. Unfortunately, the search on her phone screen yields no results, leaving Yeren quite intrigued about the creature. Wolfgang confirms that is a very strong demon with whom he dueled before losing consciousness in the cave. The warrior cries in silence as he says he needs to defeat it to finally return home and see his beloved family. With a sad look, Yeren delicately advises the barbarian that he needs to accept that ancient Germania no longer exists. She explains that over 1,000 years have passed and that the lands of his former homeland now belong to a country called Norway. Shocked, the hero realizes that everything he knew and loved in the past now boils down to mere lines in history books. Taken by sudden fury, the barbarian readies his giant fist, demonstrating all his frustration at that revelation. He delivers a monstrous punch against the room's wall, breaking the entire concrete structure with extreme ease. Wolfgang shouts, furious, saying he needs to find a way to get his dear family back, no matter what. The girl watches the scene, startled, and tries to remind him that the people from his past passed away many centuries ago. The warrior guarantees that their resurrection was the condition of his divine contract and begs for help to find the enemy. Yeren promises that if the demon is still active somewhere, she will certainly find him using her resources. Relieved by the promise, the barbarian agrees to cooperate fully with the young woman's goals from that moment on. He recognizes that she had a special purpose in waiting for his awakening and accepts to align his plans with hers. Wolfgang only imposes the condition that she use all her influence to track down the whereabouts of the demon Devil House. She warns that he will need a hunter's license to be able to walk freely and act legally in the modern world. She comments that, fortunately, he already meets all the necessary requirements, while the barbarian finds that life complicated. The girl tries to cheer him up by saying that official hunters have several incredible privileges in current society. She details that he will receive free housing and a high salary, leaving the hero thoughtful about the value of this money. On the way to the test, she says that besides the cash prize, he will be able to make a valuable contract with the constellations. The barbarian asks about the constellations, while the young woman explains that they function as guardian deities of the stars. Yeren says that these divine entities favor talented people and give all necessary support to their prodigies. Wolfgang says he knows angels but has never heard of constellations, which according to the guide, appeared only 15 years ago. Upon entering the gymnasium, the hero sees a crowd and discovers that today is the day of the Hunter Academy promotion test. Yeren points to a huge structure in the center of the room and asks if the barbarian can see that monument. She explains that the monument is the Wall of Trials, infused with the power of the legendary Spartan hero Leonidas I. Wolfgang thinks the Great Wall looks fragile and that it would break easily with just a simple touch of his hands. At the registration desk, the attendant asks for the candidate's name, and Yeren officially introduces him as Wolfgang. The attendant demands a guarantor because he is a foreigner, and Yeren uses her own professional license to vouch for the hero. A strong man dressed as a Spartan soldier walks by them holding the sacred spear of the constellation of Leonidas. Yeren explains that placing the weapon on the pedestal will activate the wall and fill the whole place with powerful divine energy. The Spartan warrior positions the golden spear on the pedestal, generating electric sparks of great power around the altar. The Wall of Trials begins to glow intensely, with a dazzling golden light emanating directly from the sacred weapon. Magic circles of divine energy cover the entire surface of the immense metal structure that serves as a test for the recruits. In the middle of the crowd of candidates, Wolfgang observes all that exaggerated ritual and thinks they are being too dramatic for nothing. The examiner asks for silence from all the young people present and officially announces the start of the promotion evaluations. The barbarian suddenly changes expression upon feeling up close that immense divine aura has something very familiar. The trial wall in the gym begins to emanate an absurd amount of golden energy, pouring out from the Spartan spear. The gray-haired examiner asks the young candidates to settle down because the first evaluation is about to begin. Wolfgang observes the glowing wall closely and instantly recognizes the mysterious aura radiating from the monument. A system message notifies that the constellation of Leonidas has detected an intriguing presence and demands the test start immediately. The audience of young hunters erupts in excitement upon realizing that a deity has shown interest in one of the candidates. The instructor calls Go Yuna from the prestigious Blue Dragon family to be the first candidate to take the grand test. The young woman walks confidently under the whispers of the spectators, who talk about her family's fame in the hunter world. Go Yuna releases an immense surge of blue energy in front of the wall, showing that she already holds a provisional contract with a deity. The instructors chat excitedly, believing that today they might witness the rise of a truly contracted hunter. The proud warrior concentrates her blue flames into her fist and lets out a powerful shout before unleashing her attack on the monument. She strikes the large glowing wall with all her might, releasing a shock wave that echoes throughout the entire testing gym. The wall's magic panel blinks and records an impressive score of over 1,200 points on the screen. Wolfgang asks if that was good, and Yurin explains excitedly that such a score is worthy of an active professional hunter. Go Yuna smiles, convinced that she was the one responsible for attracting the attention and desire of the constellation of Leonidas. System messages show that the constellation remains impatient and demands that they send the next participant to the test immediately. The candidate is left completely shocked and speechless upon realizing that the divine interest was not directed at her after all. To make matters worse, the constellation that supported her feels disappointed with her performance and cancels the provisional contract. The girl falls into despair when she feels a heavy hand touch her shoulder roughly, telling her to leave the area at once. A muscular and arrogant young man mocks the girl, saying the deity could only be looking for someone strong like him. He sneers, saying she should be thankful for having had a provisional contract, and tells her to go cry far away from the test arena. The other candidates recognize the arrogant youth as Kim Jin-woo and comment that he really has high chances of winning. The screen shows that the descendant of the Barbarian constellation grants a massive increase in physical power to Kim Jin-woo's body, enveloped in an intense red aura. The young man charges forward, delivering a devastating punch toward the giant wall. Kim Jin-woo roars with excitement, believing he is the only protagonist worthy of receiving the gaze and blessing of the stars. The impact force is so monstrous that the evaluators have to protect themselves from the violent cloud of dust generated in the arena. The panel records over 2,000 points, leaving the instructor stunned by a level of power never seen before in the exam. The young man celebrates arrogantly, and the spectators agree that such a frightening score justifies the constellation's outcry. The examiners comment, terrified, that the young man has reached a level equivalent to high-ranking veteran hunters. Kim Jin-woo stares at the wall and asks, presumptuously, if that overwhelming blow was enough to please the hero Leonidas. Suddenly, a terrifying and crushing presence takes over the entire gym, leaving the arrogant youth paralyzed with fear. The system announces that the constellation of Leonidas roars in fury, causing Kim Jin-woo to fall to his knees under the immense divine pressure. The young man trembles in terror on the ground, not understanding why he irritated the deity so much after achieving a perfect score. He mentally questions why his Barbarian constellation failed to bring him to the level required by the hero Leonidas. The wall glows with a divine message from Leonidas, proclaiming that he is a legendary hero who has already defeated thousands of demons. Wolfgang calmly climbs the arena steps under the incredulous gaze of the defeated youth who doesn't understand what is happening. The Barbarian stops in front of Kim Jin-woo and tells him to get out of the way once and for all, as he is not the warrior the deity seeks. The young man stands up enraged and shouts at Wolfgang, saying that today is not that old man's test day, and tells him to wait. Wolfgang calmly warns that he is only holding back because he made a promise and tells the arrogant youth to get lost immediately. Kim Jin-woo grabs Wolfgang's arm aggressively, questioning if the barbarian thinks his words are some kind of joke. The warrior looks irritably at his trapped hand, demonstrating that his patience with the insolent boy has reached its limit. He shifts his gaze toward the audience to find Yirin in the crowd of spectators watching the commotion. The young woman makes a frantic gesture with her head, silently begging the powerful barbarian not to hurt the candidate. Wolfgang sighs deeply and focuses his sharp vision on his opponent, deciding to resolve that provocation another way. Kim Jin-woo continues to provoke him, demanding that the barbarian apologize on his knees for having offended his protective constellation. He points his finger insolently at Wolfgang's chest, saying that trash like him has no right to disrespect him. The muscular youth makes threats, saying that the barbarian will suffer grave consequences if he irritates his powerful divine constellation. Wolfgang just gives a half smile and ironically suggests asking the deity for its opinion directly to clear up any doubts. The hero proudly reveals his name is Wolfgang and says, if the constellation is of barbarians, it will surely remember him. Suddenly, a colossal beam of blue energy tears through the gym ceiling, causing generalized panic among all the young hunters. A colossal barbarian deity appears from the sky and kneels with deep respect before Wolfgang, leaving everyone terrified. Yirin watches the scene completely bewildered, realizing that an entire constellation has personally descended to the test site. The massive divine entity bows with extreme respect, hailing Wolfgang as the true supreme hero of the barbarians. Wolfgang asks if the spirit is angry at his lack of manners, but the deity says it respects only his authority. The spirit begs for the pardon of the insolent young hunter, who remains paralyzed and in shock on the gym floor. The barbarian agrees to forgive him, but suggests that the deity take serious measures against the boy for abusing his power. The gigantic energy avatar agrees fully with Wolfgang, confirming it had already intended to punish the arrogant boy. With just one movement, Kim Jin-woo is thrown violently through the air by the fury of his own deity. A bright flash of energy seals the young man's fate against the gym ceiling, showing that his power has been completely revoked. The youth collapses unconscious on the floor, while the system announces the definitive cancellation of all his divine contracts. Yirin is speechless to see a legendary constellation act with such submission before that mysterious barbarian. Wolfgang walks slowly to the center of the arena, under the terrified gazes of all the young candidates. He stops before the altar and observes the sacred weapon of Leonidas's constellation with curiosity to perform his test. The protagonist breaks into a confident smile and asks if the deity of the wall can handle a bit of his true power. The system notifies that Leonidas is extremely moved by the presence of the barbarian hero and burns with his Spartan will. Wolfgang thanks the deity for its fighting spirit and decides to show a little of his own determination in that test. He focuses his vision and decides to release a monstrous amount of energy to respond to the constellation's excitement. A terrible storm of blue aura erupts from the barbarian's body, sweeping through the entire gym with overwhelming pressure. The surrounding candidates are pushed violently by the strong gale, not understanding what kind of bizarre power that is. The wind roars deafeningly while everyone in the audience tries to hold on, desperate not to be blown away. Yirin tries to protect her face amid the wind, realizing with fear that this was far from being a common hunter test. The young woman realizes with dread that Wolfgang is not taking a common test, but rather testing the resilience of the deity itself. She watches in shock as she sees the hero is indeed challenging the strength limits of the first Leonidas's constellation. Under the barbarian's absurd pressure, Leonidas's sacred relic begins to crack all over and lose its golden glow. Wolfgang warns that continuing to resist is useless and tells the deity to surrender because he has no intention of losing. A new and colossal explosion of blue energy shakes the gym's concrete structures, threatening to collapse everything. Yirin can barely stay on her feet due to the overwhelming pressure of the warrior, which surpasses all known human limits. She closes her eyes, fearing the gym will collapse on everyone's heads if no one stops that furious barbarian in time. Suddenly, all that terrifying pressure disappears in the blink of an eye, leaving the environment silent once again. Yurin opens her eyes, confused to see the storm has vanished, and notices the other candidates whispering in fear. The warrior appears suddenly right behind her and touches her shoulder calmly, startling the distracted young woman. Wolfgang warns quietly that he is leaving because that test has lost all meaning for him to continue. The girl follows him, confused, not understanding why he would want to quit the hunter evaluation so suddenly. At the test arena, assistants call desperately for the head instructor to report a grave anomaly at the altar. The examiner runs to the center of the arena and is horrified to see that Leoninaus's sacred relic has shattered into pieces. The examiner goes into a full-blown panic, not knowing what to do upon noticing deep cracks spreading throughout the wall. The gigantic trial wall collapses with a thunderous roar, generating a huge cloud of dust and total destruction in the gym. Later, they watch the news of the disaster on the office TV, and Wolfgang says calmly that the wall was too weak for him. An electronic beep indicates that their service number has finally been called at the association's consultation desk. Yurin calls the big guy to accompany her the counter to resolve the bureaucratic red tape for his new license. The association employee confirms Wolfgang's name and prepares to address a delicate issue with them both. He warns that to receive the hunter license, they must pay a fine of 100 million won for the destruction of the wall. Yurin is completely shocked and breathless to hear the astronomical value of the fine they will need to pay. The clerk hands over the F-class license and explains that they were lucky because there were no strict penalty rules for a broken relic. Outside the building, the girl hands over the license and says, disheartened, that he now has a huge debt of 90 million won. Sitting on a park bench, the barbarian asks if that is a lot of money, and Yurin breaks down in tears, fearing bankruptcy. Wolfgang asks if hunters don't earn well, and she explains that only elite professionals manage to accumulate fortunes. The young woman laments, saying that archaeology hunters like her depend on sponsorships and could never pay that fine. Wolfgang says it's all right and guarantees confidently that he can defeat hundreds of monsters easily with just a single punch. The barbarian stares at the girl with determination and orders her to guide him immediately to the nearest dungeon to hunt. She explains that they need an agency to work, and the hero compares the modern term to the old guilds of his era. Yurin explains that agencies collect the spoils and obtain permits for dungeons in exchange for a commission. She says the fee charged varies from 20 to 30%, but explains they resolve disputes quickly. However, the first agency they visit rejects Wolfgang immediately because he is a foreigner in that country. Another place refuses to hire him because the barbarian doesn't have a graduation diploma from the famous local academy. Yet another agency refuses to sign the contract because Wolfgang simply has no credit history there. Wolfgang complains that people of this era talk too much, while Yurin tries to calm him down, explaining their reasons. While walking on the sidewalk, Yurin suddenly turns around, intrigued upon noticing the silence of her giant companion. The barbarian stares at the girl without understanding why the people of this new era think so bureaucratically. Yurin suggests he shave to look cleaner, but gives up when she remembers he wears a huge wolf pelt. Wolfgang asserts that a beard is the pride of a barbarian and that his cape belongs to the legendary and powerful Fenrir clan. The girl retorts that it is useless to have pride if he doesn't change his look to get a hunter job. A man in a suit approaches timidly, and the two turn around, startling the subject with an impatient shout. The man smiles sheepishly and asks if they are looking for a hunter agency to get a contract. The recruiter explains he represents the famous Mew agency and guarantees they are the best large-scale firm around. However, Yurin remembers very well that the agency is extremely famous for cheating and exploiting novice hunters. Already in the office, the recruiter says he heard about their rejections, but that the agency has lowered its hiring requirements. The girl sighs, for she knows they act like crooks, and that is why no hunter wants to sign with the agency. The man offers a signing bonus of 20 million won with profit sharing and weekly dungeon obligations. Yeren is revolted in silence upon realizing that the abusive proposal is basically a terrible slave contract. Wolfgang suddenly hits the table and demands a 100 million won bonus to sign, leaving the young woman desperate. The barbarian says he needs to pay the millionaire fine, but Yeren warns that accepting that money would be a terrible idea. The recruiter smiles maliciously and agrees to pay the 100 million requested by the giant warrior. The man imposes the condition that the contract now have a 10-year duration with profits split in half. On the street, Yeren complains to Wolfgang for having accepted, without thinking, a contract full of extremely abusive terms. Wolfgang replies that he knows the importance of this well, and that he saw many suffer in the past because of divine pacts. The girl hits her hand on her forehead, not understanding why he was so careless, even knowing the dangers of a bad deal. The hero states seriously that he always does everything to help those who support him, for that is how he lived his entire life. He asks only that she help him find the terrible demon, Devil House, who exterminated his entire beloved tribe. Wolfgang explains that killing that villain is the only way to resurrect his family and his fellow warriors. Yeren apologizes upon noticing his tragic past and confesses that she worries a lot because he is from another distant era. The hunter smiles and says that helping the big guy adapt to this new modern reality is her own destiny. The businessman interrupts the conversation to announce that the hotel room promised to the hunter is already ready. Later, in the cell phone chat, a friend asks Yeren if she saw the recent news about the relic. Lying in bed, the girl sees her friends in the group chatting about the statue that broke the relic and awakened from the seal. She thinks that was a legendary feat, but that it almost left her completely bankrupt with a large fine. In the chat, her colleagues begged her to introduce the barbarian, but Yeren replies that she would never do such a silly thing. Meanwhile, Wolfgang agrees to follow the businessman to the lodging to finally be able to rest from all the confusion. The barbarian says goodbye to his new ally with a serious and firm look before walking toward his destination. He glances sideways before leaving and leaves Yeren thoughtful on the street as the sun sets on the horizon. Alone, Yeren sighs, worried if the big guy will be okay, and laments not having bought soda for him. The recruiter shows the door to room 305, and the hero asks when he can start clearing dungeons. The agency employee explains he can enter the dungeons on weekdays, with 2 mandatory days required. The warrior asks if there are problems with going all 5 days, and the businessman replies that there would be none at all. The man warns that the coordinates and departure times will be sent by text messages on his cell phone. With everything resolved, the employee says goodbye politely, wishing a good night's rest to the new hire. Wolfgang compares the small, dark room to a humble and cramped dwarf inn from his old era. He sits on the bed, thinking the place is a little better, but soon realizes he needs to urgently find the house's bathroom. Totally in the dark, the barbarian is confused and tries to think of some way to find a torch to light the place. The hero suddenly remembers the cell phone the girl mentioned and searches for the mysterious rectangular device that glows. The warrior grabs a shiny credit card, thinking it is the device, and is confused by its tiny size. Wolfgang observes the small gold debit card and concludes that this current era is full of incomprehensible things. He lies down in the dark, thinking it won't be easy to adapt to the technological novelties of this new modern world. The next day, the gray-haired supervisor gathers the novice hunters and asks if everyone in the group has arrived. The man is shocked to see the giant barbarian approach, wearing only absurd attire and his huge wolf cape. The person in charge asks if he is the rookie and questions if he really intends to enter the dungeon dressed like that. Wolfgang gets annoyed with the subject's attitude and wonders how he dares to face him with such insolence and arrogance. The barbarian then remembers Yeren's request, which made him promise he would never attack another person violently. In the memory, he questions the reasons he cannot act with physical force against those who disrespected him on the street. The young woman explains that the modern world is very different from his era and that humanity depends on hunters' unity. She highlights that the flow of information nowadays is incredibly fast thanks to the internet and modern radio networks. Yaren emphasizes that people today deeply hate seeing humans attacking others in a cowardly and aggressive way. The hunter remembers he needs to find the terrible demon from his past to achieve his personal revenge. She shakes her head negatively, begging him to keep calm and patient so as not to ruin his own plans. Yaren warns that if he gets into fights with humans, it will be even harder to track the whereabouts of the fugitive demon. Back in the present, the barbarian decides to swallow his pride and just replies to the man that he wouldn't do anything to him. The person in charge warns that this is a slime dungeon and orders the rookie to wear special protective gear. The man touches the giant sword and asks with disdain what that huge piece of flat metal in his hand is. The supervisor orders him to put the weapon aside and take the opportunity to take a bath before changing clothes. With great patience, the barbarian breathes deeply and agrees to follow the absurd instructions of that annoying supervisor. However, the warrior starts taking off his pants right there in the middle of the street, leaving the supervisor in complete despair. Wolfgang asks where the nearest stream is to bathe, leaving everyone around even more wide. Shortly after, the group of hunters follows in a blue pickup truck along a dirt road toward the work site. The other F-rank hunter yawns lazily, but the supervisor tells the youth to stop complaining about the work trip. The boy retorts, saying the place seems easy since their job is just to collect pieces of dead slimes. He explains he needs quick money to pay the registration fee for the hunter promotion test. The supervisor doubts the boy's ability and says it is impossible to find a safe job that pays that easily. The youth complains about the low pay, but the irritated boss shouts that if he isn't satisfied, he can quit. The pickup truck finally stops near the dungeon entrance, with the giant crossing his arms in the vehicle's bed. The Mew agency employee who hired them appears to greet the group at that dungeon's entrance door. The boy finds it strange that an agency manager is there, but soon realizes it's because of the new hunter's debut. The manager asks how the rookie's performance is, and the supervisor says they will test his strength right now. The businessman is scared to see Wolfgang wearing only common worker overalls without a shirt underneath. The warrior explains that they told him to take off his clothes and that at least the overalls don't hinder his fast movements. The businessman warns that the issue is safety, since he should use a sealed, protective suit against toxins. The companion reveals, desperate, that he tried to find the right clothes, but Wolfgang's body is so giant that nothing fit. The manager says it's okay if he at least wears a gas mask and takes great care not to touch the slimes. The group leader orders them to fetch a suitable suit quickly, while the other hunters start cleaning the first floor. The supervisor asks the administrator if just a gas mask will be enough to guarantee the rookie's life. The manager guarantees that the first floor is safe because it contains only dead monsters, but says the second is dangerous. The boy warns he will fetch the special clothing and begs the barbarian in no way to go down to the second basement. The hunters finally enter the dark place with the mission of collecting all the slime remains scattered on the floor. The other hunter says he already knows the place well and that they only need to worry about the cavern's poisonous gases. Wolfgang, with his arms crossed and a serious look, asks if there are indeed many of those creatures dead in the area. The giant then questions how many of those metal containers to carry the slimes they brought with them. The youth warns the warrior that the special glass boxes are very thick and too heavy to carry. Wolfgang carries several heavy containers on his back without the slightest effort, lamenting only that he couldn't carry even more. The barbarian says he knows slimes, but comments that they are such weak monsters that he always ignored them in the past. Companion explains that novice hunters always fight with them and is surprised to spot one of the slimes right ahead. The boy picks up the sphere and explains that the dead slime hardens, but warns never to touch it without gloves due to the poison. Ignoring the warning, the warrior holds the poison with his own unprotected hands, leaving the companion in complete terror. The young hunter panics and asks to examine Wolfgang's hand, warning that his skin should be melting. However, upon looking closely, the boy realizes with surprise that the barbarian warrior's hand is completely intact and without damage. village. He is totally shocked and confused, not understanding how Wolfgang's skin resisted the creature's deadly poison. The giant ignores the warning and picks up another slime from the wall, leaving the colleague even more desperate with such audacity. Wolfgang shows the finger that heals instantly and guarantees with firmness that he won't get hurt by something so weak. Then the hero removes his own gas mask, complaining that modern accessory is just uncomfortable. He guarantees he can breathe without problems and tells his colleague to focus on the work so they can get the money soon. Wolfgang remembers hearing the conversation from earlier about the need to gather coins for the promotion test. The boy is impressed by the big guy's incredible hearing and follows him through the dark corridor of that dungeon. Later, on the first floor, they notice the boxes are still empty because they didn't find almost any dead slime. The youth laments, saying the norm would be to have already filled 2 gallons and fears making a loss at the end of that day. Wolfgang suggests going down another level, but the partner warns that is too dangerous for 2 mere F-class hunters. The hero insists on going down, promising to fill all the pots, but the youth prefers to accept the daily loss and leave. The companion reinforces the danger because Wolfgang is without the protective suit, but the barbarian says that makes no difference. The boy hesitates but ends up agreeing to follow the giant toward the second floor of that mysterious monster cavern. On the way, the young hunter confesses that he is feeling a strange and bad sensation coming from the depths of the place. As they go down the stairs, Wolfgang hears a frightening noise and senses the evil energy of a demon nearby. At the Hunter Association, Yurin tries to call Wolfgang, but the operator warns his number is out of service area. She finds the occurrence strange because she remembers the agency had guaranteed they delivered a work cell phone to the Barbarian. In the association lobby, Kim tells Yaren that the place does not have protective suits in the giant warrior's size. He explains that a new custom-made suit will take a week to be ready and that he should only clean the first floor. Kim hangs up the phone, grumbling that he will need to return in a rush to the dungeon to resolve the case personally. Yaren appears suddenly behind him and startles the businessman by asking if Wolfgang is at the slime dungeon. She demands explanations about the silent cell phone, and the businessman swears he delivered the devices, but doesn't know what happened. Very irritated, the girl orders him immediately to take her to the exact place where the barbarian warrior was sent. Meanwhile, in the depths of the slime dungeon, the group reaches the restricted entrance of the dreaded second basement. Wolfgang finds a living creature glowing, and his colleague panics, warning that the living ones are much more poisonous. Without showing any kind of concern, the warrior squeezes and crushes the poisonous monster using only his hands. He throws the creature's pieces into the gallon and notices with satisfaction that the second floor has many more dead monsters. The youth celebrates happily upon seeing the container full, knowing that now he will have money to pay for the promotion test. He suggests they return immediately to the surface to be able to collect the fair payment for the work. However, Wolfgang's gaze drifts to a huge shadowy opening on the floor that leads to the mysterious third floor. The youth approaches the dark passage, afraid that the barbarian has descended recklessly to the forbidden level. He remembers that the entrance to that lower floor is expressly forbidden for low-rank hunters. The sign warns that the area is controlled by the powerful Holy Star Guild and that whoever ignores the rules will be punished with death. The boy runs down the stairs, shouting for the big guy while dodging strange monster seeds on the floor. He is shocked to see the Slime King trapped in a tube and realizes that the creatures on the other floors were created there. Wolfgang observes a huge mana injector that provides continuous energy to keep the big monster's barrier active. The boy notices that small creatures do not stop coming out of smaller metal tubes and spreading throughout the facility. He explains that they go up instinctively toward the upper floors, seeking the external light of the surface. The novice hunter understands then that the Holy Star Guild created that bizarre scheme to profit from the monsters. Suddenly, Wolfgang becomes alert and comments to his partner that the wind circulation changed drastically in the place. The ground begins to shake violently, leaving the young hunter terrified. Not knowing what is about to happen, Wolfgang points upward, noticing that a large amount of debris is falling down through a huge duct. an immense avalanche of household trash falls directly onto the tank where the large, slimy creature is trapped. The barbarian warrior observes that bizarre scene with attention and concludes that they are feeding the slime king with trash. The giant monster quickly consumes all that organic and industrial filth that is dumped straight from the surface. The monster then starts to expel new smaller creatures through the metal tubes connected to the large reservoir. The partner is outraged upon realizing that the guild profits by feeding the terrible slime king with the entire city's trash. At that, Wolfgang's system activates his ability given by Seraphim upon detecting an unknown language being spoken there. The colleague asks if he heard something new, and the warrior replies thoughtfully that it is not just a sound. Suddenly, a strong greenish light shines at the back of the room, calling the immediate attention of the startled young hunter. He shouts, pointing behind him upon noticing that all the slimes had left are returning with great haste. A large amount of green slime hits Wolfgang's face, covering his entire head with the substance. The boy panics completely to see the giant companion being completely swallowed by a wave of monsters. Trapped inside the mass of green slime, the hero remains calm and motionless with his eyes closed, maintaining his concentration. At that moment, he hears a weak and mournful voice coming from inside the big monster, begging to be killed. Wolfgang opens his eye with determination upon realizing that the giant creature truly has the ability to speak. The creature's mind, the voice echoes desperately, begging for death to finally be freed from the pain. The barbarian promises to grant the wish if the creature answers if it knows the whereabouts of the terrible demon, Devil House. The monster replies sadly that it knows nothing, and Wolfgang laments the fact of not getting the desired lead. Back in the real world, the slime starts to drip down the warrior's muscular body, which still remains standing. The colleague asks if he is okay upon seeing that his clothes were melted by that slime's corrosive acidity. Wolfgang tells the boy to shut up and warns seriously that the giant creature asked to be killed once and for all. The boy is incredulous to hear that the slime king wishes to die, and the barbarian confirms the huge monster's wish. The boy remembers that they are only F rank, but the barbarian asks if it is enough to destroy the mana injector to kill it. The colleague stutters, saying yes, but warns that he cannot break the guild's things in that reckless manner. He insists they leave there because the facility is protected, and Wolfgang seems to agree in silence with the boy. However, the hero delivers a violent punch against the mana injector, cracking the glass and startling the young hunter. The colleague repeats, desperate, that the Songshan Guild controls everything there and begs them to return immediately. The boy can barely finish speaking before noticing that the big guy has already started to crack the barrier with the punch. The youth gets in front and asks, desperate, how they will deal with the consequences of destroying a forbidden area. Wolfgang tells the boy to get out of the way and states, in an intimidating manner, that he has a sacred promise to keep. The boy tries to argue about contractual rights, but the barbarian warns coldly that now it is already too late. The novice hunter shouts, terrified, to see that the Slime King's containment shield is crumbling completely. The youth wonders, scared, why all the creatures are agitated and acting in such a frenetic manner. Wolfgang tells his colleague to flee there immediately while he prepares to resolve the situation with his hands. The barbarian warns that the place will explode soon and tells the boy to run fast to save his own life there. Wolfgang stares at him with tranquility and replies that that is a totally useless concern regarding him. The boy then starts to run, desperate, toward the exit, begging for the giant to also manage to escape. Alone before the huge monster, Wolfgang warns seriously that finally the time has come to end his suffering. A gigantic and violent explosion of energy erupts, destroying the containment structures of the third basement. The blinding glare consumes the entire underground environment, generating an immense shock wave that shakes the entire dungeon. In the middle of all that green dust, the powerful barbarian remains firm, supporting the impact's pressure with ease. On the surface, the sun begins to set between the mountains, illuminating the entrance guardhouse of that dangerous dungeon. The businessman Kim arrives accompanied by Yeren in a silver van and greets the supervisor who was waiting for them. Kim asks about the group, and the person in charge replies, worried, that the guys should have left a long time ago. He finds the excessive delay strange, and everyone looks apprehensive toward the entrance duct of the mysterious dark cavern. Suddenly, the earth begins to shake violently, startling the group while birds flee flying from the trees. Yeren holds onto the vehicle door and wonders in shock what could be causing that sudden earthquake around there. The men fall to their knees on the ground, thinking it is a seismic tremor, but Yeren suspects the problem is something else. Tremor ceases quickly, leaving everyone a little more relieved while they try to regain their balance on the road. The person in charge decides to make an emergency report, afraid of what might have happened to the two novice hunters. Yeren asks for a borrowed gas mask and warns she intends to accompany the search inside the dungeon immediately. In the basement, the monster's voice asks to see the outside world before leaving, not to die trapped in that dark duct. Faced with imminent destruction, the creature wraps around the barbarian's body, asking him to carry it to the location's exit. The slime attaches to Wolfgang's waist like a verdant armor, and he comments that the feeling is very weird. The powerful barbarian takes a colossal leap toward the exit, leaving behind an immense trail of verdant energy. He crosses the thick solid rock walls of the cavern, which begin to collapse due to the impact's absurd force. The warrior bursts triumphantly through the skies before Yeren, who watches that unbelievable scene totally in shock. While trying to climb the stairs, the young hunter feels the dungeon shake and is scared by the strong vibration. He drops the slime pots upon realizing with horror that the ceiling is collapsing and that the great slime king has freed itself. Without looking back, the boy runs desperate through the dark corridors, trying to escape that collapse. He looks back, terrified, upon noticing that the green monsters are approaching him with great speed. The slimes start to jump against the walls, and the boy curses upon noticing they are practically at his heels. Suddenly, Wolfgang appears swiftly amid the shadows, jumping over the monsters to rescue his young colleague. The hero runs at high speed through the tunnels with the verdant slime king, trapped like a sash on his own waist. Upon spotting the bright light at the end of the tunnel, the boy cries with relief upon realizing they reached the dungeon's exit. The youth sheds tears of happiness, thinking to himself that he managed to survive that mortal ordeal. He looks to the side, glancing sideways, and encounters the extremely serious and focused expression of the barbarian warrior. At that moment, the big guy grabs the boy by the collar of his protective suit, leaving the youth terrified and confused. Wolfgang simply throws his teammate with force toward the open air to get him out of danger. The boy flies through the air, screaming in panic while the giant jumps right behind him, exiting the dungeon for good. The young hunter falls, rolling clumsily over the railing of the entrance guardhouse under everyone's gaze. Wolfgang focuses his vision with determination to face what is to come without showing any sign of fatigue. The barbarian lands with mastery, making the stone ground crack and raising an immense cloud of green smoke around. A huge explosion of slimes through the air, as if it were a giant tentacle of that verdant creature. The employees on the surface look up in complete panic to see the acid rain of monsters falling upon them. Yeren observes, terrified from the side of the van, the gigantic amount of slimes that is covering the entire sky of the place. The colossal green detonation illuminates the top of the mountains, spreading monster remains throughout the entire forest region. The colleague asks, surprised, why he brought a small part of the slime king alive to the outside instead of just killing it. Wolfgang replies he made a deal and says the prisoner monster deserved at least to see the sunlight a single time. The youth is moved deeply upon realizing the immense heart and the deep sense of honor of that hero warrior. The giant hands a mysterious and bright purple energy core into the trembling hands of his young companion. He explains that that object is the Slime King's core and that the monster will finally die if the sphere is detonated. Wolfgang reveals that whoever breaks the core will inherit part of the creature's mana, leaving the youth quite enthusiastic. Without understanding such generosity, the young hunter asks the reason. He is handing over something so valuable. The barbarian says he doesn't need that strength and that is a gift of gratitude because his tribe always honors debts. The boy is speechless before the noble and honorable attitude of the big guy, who has just changed the course of his career. The big slime dissolves slowly under the sunlight, thanking the warrior for allowing it to see the light of day. Wolfgang spots Yeren from afar on the road and waves happily, asking if she came all that way just to greet him. He jumps from the guardhouse straight to the dirt ground and runs toward the van, leaving his red-haired partner quite surprised. The employees call, desperate, asking for dozens of transport trucks to collect the immense amount of trash. Yeren asks if they can leave with the warrior, and the supervisor agrees, saying the settlement will take time. The girl pushes the barbarian inside the pip truck in a hurry while he questions the reason for such rushing. Inside the car, Yeren asks if he caused all that mess with the slimes, but the hero denies it blatantly. She tells the driver to speed up the vehicle as fast as possible while Wolfgang insists he only kept a promise. The young woman warns that they need to hurry because there is a very important person waiting anxiously for him in the city. The warrior widens his eyes and asks if they finally managed to find any clues about the villain, Devil House. Night finally falls over the mountains, and the other novice hunter prepares to leave in a cargo pickup truck. The gray-haired supervisor says goodbye to the agency manager, who still needs to wait for the payment approval. The boy in overalls agrees, saying the paperwork will be delayed due to the colossal amount of monsters collected there. On the phone, the manager confirms, surprised, that the total weight of the creatures collected was an incredible 150 tons. In the office, the guild team leader shouts, furious, on the phone, not believing the report of that absurd weighing. The woman asks her brother if he would send the amount of over 1 billion won, just by basing it on an informal conversation. She demands that he go investigate personally and use his head instead of depending just on his important position from his sister. On the other side of the line, the guy swallows hard and agrees to return immediately to check the underground situation. He vents to the manager about his sister's arrogance, and Kim asks if the guild will refuse to pay the amount. The guy explains he was ordered to do an emergency inspection of the duct and complains about the need to work overtime. Junmo walks sadly to the dark entrance, conforming to the rigid orders he received from his superiors at the guild. The bathroom shower starts to pour hot water in abundance, creating a dense curtain of smoke and steam. Wolfgang observes the water pouring and is impressed with the operation of that mysterious modern plumbing. Hero asks if they collect rainwater on the house's roof, and Yeren just listens to his doubt from outside. Yeren tells him to hurry in the shower and explains that the person awaiting him is essential to help him find the clues. The warrior agrees calmly while looking at the gray t-shirt folded that the young woman left set aside for him. Wolfgang walks barefoot, wearing very tight clothes, and asks if the man is a leader of archaeology hunters. Yeren says it is already late but promises to take him the next day to buy shoes and clothing suitable for his size. The barbarian complains of being starving, and the girl promises to buy food as soon as they present themselves to the expert. Yeren opens the office door with a friendly smile and introduces Wolfgang to the elderly man who was waiting patiently for them. The experienced doctor turns, adjusting his glasses on his face, and observes with attention the huge warrior who just entered. The doctor introduces himself as Koi Myongjan, and Wolfgang shakes his hand, revealing his name and his old wolf tribe. Wolfgang is quite intrigued and asks in which territory the mysterious archaeology tribe used to live in the past. Laughing at the doubt, the doctor explains patiently that archaeology is a scientific field of study and not the name of a tribe. The barbarian understands the scientific explanation but soon interrupts, saying that the most urgent thing at the moment is to get to eat. Yeren brings several stacked boxes full of crispy fried chicken to satisfy the warrior's gigantic appetite. The hero devours the food voraciously, while the two hunters observe him surprised and offer cola soda. Drinking the soda straight from the bottle, the barbarian asks the doctor what the urgent matter he wished to address was. The doctor explains he has important questions, and Wolfgang says he will answer everything that is within his reach. Choi questions how the barbarian manages to speak the current language with such perfection as if he were a native citizen of Seoul. The warrior explains he possesses the protection of winged beings who granted him the gift of speaking any language in the world. The doctor is quite surprised and asks if the winged beings mentioned would be some new type of constellation. Wolfgang is confused by the term and remembers having seen those divine figures during his recent hunter test. He cites the example of the golden deity of Leonidas that manifested itself before everyone present in the exam arena. The warrior also cites the other barbarian constellation that bowed before him, showing deep respect and fear. Wolfgang concludes, in a relaxed manner, that those weak divine figures from before are called constellations today. He relates that the angels were superior deities who visited him in the past for the help of his powerful tribe. A short time later, the doctor stands up, thoughtful, to organize mentally everything he just heard from that story. He recaps that angels and demons were at war, and that the barbarians decided to fight at the request of the winged deities. The doctor relates that all the barbarians were killed, and that Wolfgang left alone in search of revenge against the creatures. He describes that the hero eliminated the enemy hordes until finally coming face to face with the dreaded villain, Devil House. Wolfgang completes, saying that he ended up falling into a terrible magic trap of the demon that petrified him for 1,000 years. Yeren holds the giant's hand with affection, guaranteeing that they will manage to find the demon's whereabouts in the country. The warrior remains thoughtful in silence, demonstrating deep seriousness upon remembering his family losses. He closes his eyes calmly, trying to calm the internal anger that always arises when recalling the massacre of his tribe. The doctor apologizes for the painful memory, but the barbarian states he needs to keep that memory always alive in his mind. Choi takes advantage of the moment of frank conversation to ask, timidly, one more big favor to the powerful warrior from another era. The hero opens his eyes, fixing his gaze on the elderly man, and grants permission for him to speak what he desires. The elderly man says he needs to verify his authenticity as a relic since he was discovered petrified in a tomb. Wolfgang lets out a brief ironic smile upon hearing the word relic being used by the expert to refer to him. The doctor puts his hand in his gray vest pocket to remove a special archaeology item he brought to the meeting. He shows a golden statuette that was made by the Buddhist constellation with whom he signed his hunter contract in the country. Choi asks if he can invoke the spirit of the martial monk to analyze the barbarian's aura and confirm his identity. The warrior glances sideways, silently and suspiciously, at the small statue without answering immediately. Yeren joins her hands with sympathy and begs him to accept the test to help her in her academic research. Upon seeing his partner's excitement, the barbarian sighs and decides to reconsider the red-haired girl's request with patience. She guarantees that the doctor will also help in the search for the demon, and Wolfgang finally yields, giving his permission for the test. The statuette of the rustic Buddha begins to glow intensely, releasing a strong golden energy that illuminates the entire office. The imposing spirit of the martial monk appears in the air, declaring that Wolfgang is the great hero who ended the era of chaos. The doctor adjusts his glasses, sweating cold, without understanding the enigmatic revelation made by his own protective entity. The powerful Buddhist spirit bows completely before Wolfgang in a sign of extreme respect, leaving the elderly man in shock. The spirit of the martial monk says he doesn't need formalities and that his great victory of the past was only partial. Dr. Choi apologizes, quite sweaty, and explains that he ended up running out of mana to keep the entity's invocation. The elderly man wipes the sweat with a towel and thanks him for the conversation, confirming that the barbarian's identity is indeed real. Meanwhile, in the third basement of the slime dungeon, an employee walks toward the destroyed containment area. The novice hunter in the yellow suit is completely astonished to see that the place where the Slime King stayed is broken. He swallows hard and wonders, desperate, how that chaotic and unexplained situation could have happened inside there. At the Seongshan Guild headquarters, leader Kang Mayan shouts, furious, on the phone, wanting to know the reason for the Slime King's disappearance. Her brother relates that the containment unit is broken and empty, and she is shocked to learn that the structure was destroyed. Kang Mayan doubts that normal hunters would do that and suspects that the Mu agency sent a powerful warrior in secret. Her brother guarantees that the two who entered the place were only novice hunters and of a very low rank in the association. She is intrigued upon hearing that one of them was a complete rookie who had just obtained the official hunter license. Sensing something suspicious in the air, the leader orders him to obtain and send immediately all the subject's personal information. She plans to sue the Mu agency for damages and use the rookie's personal data to obtain the necessary evidence in court. Upon being charged about a billionaire debt, the guild leader shouts with anger, ordering the collector, who is at the company, to be expelled. Far from that confusion, the scene changes to the facade of a large shopping center that is announcing a big clearance sale. Sitting in the shoe store, Wolfgang tells Yeren that he has a very important doubt to ask about the modern world. The warrior shows the credit card and asks why he cannot talk to anyone from afar using that small object. Yeren notices the confusion and finds it funny upon noting that he was trying to make a phone call using her card. Wolfgang says he received another object that seemed bigger but decided not to bring it, thinking it was an item without utility. The young woman explains, smiling, that he completely confused the cell phone with the payment card, and the barbarian understands. The warrior complains that no one taught him to use things and asks the reason she is looking at him in that way. She gives a beautiful smile and says it is nothing, promising to explain everything in detail as soon as they finish their shopping. The store employee approaches the couple with education, asking for apologies for the delay in bringing the footwear they requested. The attendant brings the largest footwear in stock and is shocked to see the gigantic size of the powerful barbarian's feet there in the store. Meanwhile, a mysterious and suspicious man observes an old photo of Wolfgang in his traditional battle clothes. This subject in dark glasses follows closely the steps of Yeren and the warrior as they walk through the stores. Yeren helps the barbarian choose some suitable clothing so that he doesn't call so much attention on the city's streets. Wolfgang comes out of the changing room in a brown trench coat, and Yeren jokes, saying he ended up looking like a nice elderly man from another era. She suggests taking off the hat and says that without it, the hero finally looks like someone from the current century and with a fighter's style. The hero promises to strive to dress well, and the young woman explains that this style of clothing is the normal standard in these times today. Wolfgang comments that modern life is complicated, and Yeren asks him to wait a moment while she goes to the bathroom. Near there, the man in dark glasses talks with a hooded accomplice, planning to attack the barbarian by surprise in the corridor. The warrior is confused before the bathroom, not understanding the reason there being two different doors for people to enter. Suddenly, an alert arises indicating that the masked opponent activated a special running ability to advance fast. The henchman tries to grab Wolfgang's shopping bags, but the warrior dodges the enemy attack with great ease and calmness. The invader falls to the ground while the accomplice in dark glasses advances fast toward the warrior with his fist in flames. A system message reveals that the aggressor activated a powerful heavy attack technique, channeling the strength of his fist. Without sketching any reaction of concern, the imposing barbarian extends his arm with speed to intercept the enemy's strike. Wolfgang holds the aggressor's head with just one of his hands while the other adversary remains knocked out on the corridor floor. The warrior asks coldly who sent the two criminals after noticing that he was being followed by them throughout the day. The immobilized man asks if he is the famous Wolfgang and says in an arrogant manner for him accompany him without causing problems. Wolfgang squeezes the enemy's head with such force that his dark glasses shatter completely in the same instant. The aggressor screams in pain, scared by the rank F warrior's power, and begs desperately for the help of his fallen companion. The Barbarian ignores the screams and repeats the question, wanting to know who sent them and if they work for the Songshan Guild. Inside the woman's bathroom, Yeren washes her hands tranquilly and thinks that her new partner is a bit of work to take care of. She worries, thinking that he doesn't know how to use the public bathroom and laments not being able to enter with him to give some help. Wolfgang lets the man go and tells him to warn his boss that their tribe will be totally eliminated if they do that again. The two defeated henchmen flee with much pain and scared, swearing revenge for the humiliating injury they suffered there. The warrior looks at the broken glasses on the floor at the exact moment Yeren finally leaves the bathroom and walks to him. The young woman suggests going to eat something and promises to teach the Barbarian to use the cell phone and the card as soon as they reach their residence. Yeren says they will eat a lot today, spending all the money on Dr. Choi's card without any mercy. The cell phone reveals that the Songshan Guild opened a billionaire lawsuit against the Mew Agency because of the Slime King. Manager Junwon drinks his juice and finds it absurd that they blame the agency since they sent only novice hunters there. Partner thinks the collection of damages is total madness because the guild wants to charge a fortune for fake damages. The man asks if Junwon is sure that the two hunters sent to the dungeon were of a very low level. Junwon guarantees that he was once a hunter in the past and understands perfectly how this exploitation business works. The partner suggests that they analyze together the footage sent by the rival guild to support the grave accusation. The cell phone displays the video of Wolfgang defeating easily the two hunters sent to follow him at the mall. The man shows one of the fallen opponents and explains that he is a hunter who can fight at the same level as rank D. He says that the other opponent who had his head crushed by Wolfgang had just leveled up in the association. The manager hears that the guild demands to know who is supporting the Mew Agency for hiding Wolfgang's true rank. Junwon stands up, furious with his partner's distrust, and decides to go personally to demand explanations from the rivals. The partner suggests suing the guild back to recover the huge amount of money they are owing. Junwon agrees and says he needs to go fast to Cheongdam to meet a new promising hunter from the agency. The manager leaves the building and enters, in a rush, an orange taxi, ordering the driver to take him to his destination. Inside the car, he complains with anger about the rival guild's framing and fears losing all his money with their scams. Junwon looks again at his cell phone screen and notices an extremely intriguing detail in the Barbarian's fight. He notes that Wolfgang supported a special constellation strike without even blinking, even without having an active contract. The businessman starts to consider the idea of testing the warrior to discover the true level of his power. He remains thoughtful, wanting to discover if the giant is really a legendary hero or just a common hunter. A few days later, the warrior walks tranquilly across the pedestrian crossing, holding his huge sword on his shoulder. Wolfgang observes the traffic rules and jokes, saying that the king of that land must oppress his own people a lot. The Barbarian looks at the luminous traffic light, remembering the traffic instructions he received to reach his destination. Yeren waves happily from the other side of the street, calling for the giant, who feels quite relieved upon spotting the partner. The two walk together in front of the Archaeology Association building, where Dr. Choi is already waiting for them, anxious. Yeren opens the office door, calling for the elderly man, who feels very happy upon noting the arrival of the two companions. Choi apologizes for the inconvenience of making them go there and suggests that everyone go straight to the storage room. On the way, the elderly man is fascinated to analyze Wolfgang's great weapon, leaving the Barbarian a bit confused and skittish. Yeren explains that curious and exaggerated reaction is normal because it is about an archaeologist facing something ancient. The Barbarian hands over Fenrir's cape, warning that it is a valuable relic, and Choi almost falls backward upon hearing that name. Dr. Choi opens the doors and presents the great depot of relics and historical items of the association to them. He introduces the archaeologist Kang Jiho and her assistant, who are very surprised to see the living statue up close. The young researcher analyzes the warrior and thinks he is much more intimidating and gigantic than she imagined, Kang Ji-ho extends her hand with education to greet the Barbarian and introduces herself as a rank A archaeologist. The hero shakes the researcher's hand with respect and introduces himself in an imposing manner using his baptismal name. She introduces her young assistant Choi Jung-ian, who greets the warrior with much sympathy and education. Yerin appears from behind the giant, playing with the researcher, who feels very happy to see her dear companion again. The assistant is very excited upon looking at the sword and asks if it awakened together with the 1,000-year-old hero. Wolfgang explains, proud, that the great sword is passed from generation to generation among the chiefs of his old tribe. Kang Ji-ho says they arrived in good time because they need help to analyze a very mysterious relic from there. The Barbarian whispers, asking if archaeologists are always agitated, and Yerin asks him to try to understand the excitement. They look at a huge blue hammer, and she explains that the weapon was found in the same cavern where the hero was trapped. The girl reveals that the relic refused all scientific analysis and asks if he knows who the original owner was. Wolfgang touches the display's glass and remembers Jonas, who was the son of a great warrior of his old tribe. He relates that Jonas was a very brave barbarian who disputed the tribe's leadership with him and was his best friend. The hero tells that when the war started, the friend fought bravely against the demonic forces until his heroic death. He reveals, with melancholy, that that hammer belonged to his friend and later ended up becoming his own weapon in the war. The barbarian remembers when he used the hammer on the battlefield to eliminate thousands of demons before him. Yerin listens to the revelation in silence and is quite touched upon discovering the sad past behind that relic. Wolfgang looks fixedly at his friend's weapon, swearing he will find the terrible demon that took Jonas's life. Yerin holds the warrior's hand and asks that he not try to carry all his suffering alone. The redhead guarantees that now the barbarian has true companions by his side to help him on the journey. She promises to help in the search, and the hero thanks from his heart for the support received from his great partner. Ji-ho apologizes for bringing sad memories from the past, but Wolfgang says he is happy for finding the weapon. The barbarian asks if the weapon helped, and the scientist confirms that the discovery cleared up all their work. Suddenly, the hero widens his eyes and asks everyone to wait while he focuses on a mysterious piece. Wolfgang extends his hand to the shiny object after recognizing the magic arrowhead in the laboratory. The warrior becomes tense and closes his fist with force, releasing a powerful energy that starts to crack the glass. Ji-ho tells him to stop because his display case has a strong security system against theft in the laboratory. Yerin is startled by the attitude, and Wolfgang says he needs to take the object even feeling a discharge. The barbarian uses his colossal strength and delivers a punch that goes through the protection barrier completely. He roars in pain while he forces his arm into the electricity to reach the relic that called his attention. A memory from the past invades the hero's mind, showing his tribe's massacre under a rain of arrows. In the recollection, the hero appears wielding his sword beside his giant wolf, ready for battle. Wolfgang remembers the demon mocking, and in the present, he finally manages to destroy the energy barrier. The hero holds the arrowhead in his hand, while a dense smoke of black magics starts to emanate from it. Wolfgang is taken by pure hatred and pronounces the name of Devil House with an ardent desire for revenge. A short time later, the arrowhead is placed in an isolated glass jar so they can analyze it. Yerin asks if the blood is his, and the hero explains he manages to feel the presence of the hired angel's magic. Ji-ho confirms that the remnant of magic power in the arrow belongs, without a doubt, to the dangerous Devil House. The scientist complains of the danger, and the barbarian apologizes, admitting he lost control of his emotions. She accepts the apologies and says that at least the risky action brought a very valuable research result. Ji-ho says she already suspected the sacred hammer, but never imagined the arrow would guard magic secrets. The archaeologist says that the analysis would be easy if they had the help of a demon hunter on their team. She tells that distinguishing magic and divine power is difficult and admits that not even she herself suspected demons. The hero reveals that he identifies monsters because their aroma is different after facing them in battles. Ji-ho hits the table with anger, complaining about the association for ignoring her constant requests for professional help. The archaeologist asks Dr. Choi if she is wrong in demanding support, and the elderly man is embarrassed. Suddenly, she looks thoughtful at the screen and murmurs about the importance of getting the help of a hunter. The assistant Jung Ian finds his colleague's silence strange and asks what is wrong while the others look. Ji-ho suggests that Wolfgang become a demon hunter, and the warrior is confused by the sudden proposal. She explains that the doctor asked for the research about Devil House and Wolfgang accepted in exchange for useful clues. The scientist says her rank A gives access to rare data, but archaeologists only access what has already been discovered. Yurin compliments, saying that demon hunters possess total permission to read almost all the information. The young redhead guarantees that the class is rare, but the barbarian would manage to pass easily for being strong and tracking them. Wolfgang is quite interested and asks directly how he must do to become that hunter. Ji-ho replies that just take a promotion test, but Yeren becomes completely discouraged. Suddenly, the scientist finds the reaction strange, and the redhead lies on the table, explaining the big problem behind that test. Wolfgang wants to know the reason, and Yeren reveals that the promotion test was suspended indefinitely. The assistant explains that the spear of Leonidas was damaged in the test, and they will not resume until finding another one. Ji-ho collapses on the table, lamenting that without the promotion test, it became impossible for the hero to obtain the license. She apologizes to Wolfgang, but the assistant says that there exists another different path for his approval. The barbarian and the two girls raise their heads, surprised by the revelation of the youth, who smiles confidently at them. The guy repeats that there is another way to get the hunter document, and Dr. Choi asks what it would be. The youth Choi Jung-in reveals with tranquility that the barbarian needs to enroll in the Hunter Academy. The assistant tells that if his goal is to get the license, the traditional exam is not the only option. He tells that reliable institutions give the license by certificates, and Ji-ho confirms having already seen that case. Yurin asks if in the place only teenagers study, but Ji-ho says there are also 20-year-old adults around there. The scientist looks curious at Wolfgang and asks what his real age was before being petrified. The barbarian replies with pride that the 4 seasons of the year pass 33 times since his birth. The entire group is extremely shocked to learn that the powerful barbarian is only 33 years old. Yurin explains that because Ji-ho is 3 years older, he must call her Nuna, which is the correct term in their country. The warrior accepts the local etiquette calmly and decides to call the archaeologist Ji-ho Nuna from now on. Ji-ho is desperate and shouts, asking him not to call her Nuna, with that intimidating face of a mature man. Meanwhile, in the corridor, manager Jun-won warns another hunter that he will send the work schedule by message. He walks thoughtful and decides to go soon to meet the novice hunter, who has just been hired by the agency. Jun-won stops in the corridor and is quite surprised upon looking at the identification plate of one of the offices. The manager sees Wolfgang's name on the door and remembers the incredible fighting abilities demonstrated by the barbarian. He remembers the details of the hunter test and how the warriors seemed different from the other rookies. Jun-won observes the recorded video where the giant knocks out easily the 2 aggressors at the city mall. The businessman focuses his gaze and thinks he needs to evaluate the giant's strength to decide what to do with him. He plans to arrange a good excuse to provoke a fight and test if the rookie has any grave combat flaw. On the streets, Yeren guides Wolfgang about the MU agency's rules and the chance to transfer after the academy. The redhead says that Ji-ho will pay the fine, and the hero trusts all financial decisions in his partner's hands. She says that Ji-ho's guild is the best option to find clues about the terrible and wanted demon, Devil House. Yeren warns that the only hindrance is the tuition fee, and Wolfgang asks if money is a problem. The hero comments that modern society depends on money, and the redhead agrees, saying that is the standard today. Jun-won appears behind them and offers to pay the academy fee, leaving Yeren quite startled. The manager smiles and imposes as the only condition that the warrior do a small favor in exchange for the money. Wolfgang finds the request dangerous and warns he accepts the proposal to give just one punch, but doesn't wish to kill the manager. Junwon asks not to be underestimated and guarantees that he will withstand the giant's punch for being a rank C hunter. Yerin observes the man and thinks he seems too weak to manage to withstand the warrior's punch. The manager notices the doubt and says it is a great mistake to judge a person's strength only by appearance. He shows his mettle and guarantees that his constellation is strong enough to defeat even rank A hunters. The young redhead suspects, thinking it is just a bluff, for hunters of that level would be famous in the country. She wonders if there's any hidden reason for such a powerful warrior to work in such a discreet way. Yerin focuses on the metal and concludes that the object is the relic used to invoke the power of the hired entity. The hunter warns the barbarian to take care because the manager is holding a powerful magic item in his hands. Wolfgang says he doesn't refuse challenges and jokes that if the item is strong, the manager will withstand at least his strike. The giant smiles, challenging, confessing he became curious to see the strength released by that gold relic. Wolfgang warns his partner to move away to not be hit by the huge wind pressure generated by his punch. He focuses his gaze on the adversary, demonstrating to be ready for the combat that will decide the payment of his tuition. The hero tells the manager to invoke his protective constellations so that the two can begin the battle immediately. Junwon smiles and accepts Wolfgang's challenge, holding the golden artifact to give a start to the strength test. A notification reveals that the Sacred Metals constellation responded quickly to the hunter's invocation call. The gold medallion starts to glow intensely, releasing a strong gust of bluish wind that involves the entire place. The system warns that the constellation will possess Junwon's body, and Yerin is startled by the possession of clothes. The redhead is quite intrigued upon seeing the entity assume the contractor's body and wonders who the divine being is. The manager is enveloped by a glow, and his physiognomy starts to transform under the constellation's divine energy. Junwon's look changes completely, assuming the traditional and elegant form of a real inspector from past eras. Yerin tries to guess the entity's identity, observing attentively the warrior's historical attire. She discovers that the spirit is Park Mun-soo, the famous and respected secret real inspector of the country's ancient history. An army of ghost soldiers appears around the warrior, calling for everyone to clear the path for them. The soldiers march in impeccable synchronization, making the ground shake before the silent and calm barbarian hero. Wolfgang looks at the ghost battalion and asks, in an ironic manner, if he will have to strike all the soldiers at once. The inspector guarantees that he doesn't need to worry because he summoned them only to accumulate sacred energy. He tells that his entity punishes corrupt people with maximum strength and that the barbarian will not suffer damage if he is innocent. The hero accepts everything calmly and prepares his steel fist, demonstrating that he doesn't fear divine judgment. Wolfgang advances and delivers a devastating punch directly against the face of the proud real inspector in the field. The enemy widens his eyes in panic upon noticing the blow's absurd strength and tries, in vain, to ask to stop. The barbarian observes calmly the smoke dissipate and asks, in a relaxed manner, if his blow was enough. Park Mun-soo's spirit starts to disappear from Junwon's body, who falls completely defeated on the cement floor. Outside the barrier, Yerin tries to look in the middle of the ghost army, complaining that she cannot see anything. The redhead tries to push away the spectral soldiers to understand the fight, but the entire army starts to vanish in blue sparks. With the end of the divine technique, Yerin is left alone in the courtyard, confused by the sudden disappearance of all the entities. Upon spotting the warrior standing beside the fallen opponent, she is surprised to realize the combat ended so fast. The redhead runs, worried, asking if he got hurt, and Wolfgang replies calmly that he is feeling very well. The hero says he is worried about the adversary's state, and Yerin is startled, asking if the manager ended up dying. Junwon coughs, quite bruised, and laments on the floor that the outcome of that test was not as he planned in his mind. Wolfgang guarantees that he is alive and asks his partner if the tuition fee was finally paid with the punch. Yaren agrees and orders with firmness that the hero appear punctually at 9 in the morning on Monday at the academy. The two leave, leaving the manager fallen on his back on the floor, while the sun sets on the horizon of the big city. Junwan sits with difficulty, massaging his neck, relieved to note that the Barbarian's aura didn't have evil energy. The manager wipes the blood from his face, impressed to realize that the warrior managed to hit him even under possession. He focuses his gaze in a serious and analytical manner, not managing to believe the colossal strength demonstrated by the rookie. Junwan observes the two walking away and wonders, intrigued about the true origin of that mysterious warrior. The businessman starts to consider if the giant would actually be a great constellation or a being of superior divine level. Meanwhile, at the Hunter Academy, a muscular student named Jin Woo prepares, focused, for his daily training. He focuses his gaze on a large metallic strength measurement panel that already possesses a deep mark of his punches. The youth closes his fist with force, concentrating a bright flame of bluish energy to deliver a new physical attack. Jin Woo roars with determination, gathering all his concentrated magic power before hitting the training room panel. He delivers a violent punch, destroying completely the metallic equipment that registers his attack power. The youth pants, quite sweaty after the great physical effort, staring anxious at the digital score display on the wall. The red measurement screen starts to blink intensely until registering the new power record reached by the student. The display exhibits a high score number, and the hunter celebrates happily upon realizing that he is evolving in level. A few days later in the morning, the scene shows the colossal staircases that lead to the Great Seoul Academy portal. Wolfgang climbs easily the steps while Junwan crawls, tired, begging to go slower. Yorin looks back and jokes, saying that faking tiredness will not help him escape from paying the tuition fees. Junwan complains, exhausted, that it is not for the money, but for the grave side effects of the past divine possession. At the campus secretary, the notice reveals that due to the relic's destruction, the association exam was transferred there. The employee explains that as the hero already possesses the provisional license, his enrollment can be accepted immediately. He hands over the recommendation and warns that Wolfgang will start in Class F, being able to level up through the Academy's tests. Yeren celebrates in thought for managing to enter the institution thanks the sacred spear's destruction done by the hero. The redhead asks if the academy issues licenses for rare classes, and the employee is surprised by the mention of demons. He confirms and relates that the renowned and experienced Professor Kim Song-cheol is responsible for the demon hunters. Yeren murmurs the professor's name with curiosity while trying to absorb the new information about the teaching staff. The man says he is the tutor of Class F and guides the giant to follow him to the room while he analyzes the documents. The employee asks the father to wait in the room, and Wolfgang gets furious upon realizing he was confused with Yeren's father. The redhead laughs without grace at the embarrassing situation and tries to explain in a polite way that the real student is actually him. The attendant apologizes for the mistake, finding it curious that the man with a beard and imposing posture is the real student. Yeren asks with whom she must speak to pay the admission fees, and the attendant points the person responsible through the window. Through the glass, they observe the person in charge of payment climbing the great stone staircases of the Academy Hill. Junwan climbs the steps, sweating cold, and complains, quite tired, with the fact that the campus is at the top of a mountain. In the courtyard, the tutor asks Yeren if her father uses any common weapon, and the hero replies, proud, that he uses a sword. The redhead questions if personal weapons are necessary for Class F, and the man says that the special classes require the items. Wolfgang laments not having kept the sword and comments, in a confident manner, that he can invoke the weapon when it is necessary. Yaren looks confused at the warrior without understanding the true meaning of that enigmatic answer from the barbarian. Suddenly, a figure at high speed crosses the courtyard, generating a strong air displacement that surprises the group there. The mysterious man runs in an incredibly fast way, and Yeren dodges, startled with the dangerous approach of the subject. The attendant is startled upon recognizing the colleague and shouts, calling with respect for the famous Professor Kim Song-chil. The mysterious professor lands softly on the ground, demonstrating an agility and control of movements that are impressive. He remains floating in the air with his arms crossed behind and asks, friendly, if someone had called him there. The attendant explains that there is a new candidate for the Demon Hunter classes who will remain under the professor's tutelage. The official points to the teacher and guides the Barbarian to accompany him directly to the Academy's new classroom. Wolfgang warns that it is time to part, and Yeren asks worried if he will be fine alone on the training campus. The redhead gives several useful pieces of advice, asking him to call if there are problems, and reinforces not to hit anyone there. She shouts with quite a lot of firmness, insisting that the giant in no way create any kind of confusion at the academy. The hero walks imposing toward the study building while Yeren and the manager observe him leaving with worry. The young woman sighs, thoughtful, rooting from the bottom of her heart that the powerful Barbarian manages to adapt well to the new place. Junwon jokes that she seems like a mother sending her son to the army, and Yeren shouts extremely irritated with the manager. The attendant asks if they are going to pay the children's fee, and the redhead loses control, grabbing the manager and shouting with anger. After calming down, Yeren walks through the corridor and notices a wall filled with photos of various elite warriors. Junwon approaches and explains that wall is the Hall of Fame with the best hunters who graduated in each class in Seoul. The manager points to the photo of Jin Seong and tells that he's the best student of the class in which the two studied in the past. He explains that the guy was incredibly strong and came from one of the richest and most influential families of the country's conglomerate. Junwon praises the old colleague, saying that even having an easy life, he chose to follow the difficult path of battles. Yeren remembers the famous hunter, but comments that she heard rumors that he suffered from the great pressure imposed by his father. The young redhead remains thoughtful, cogitating if the sudden disappearance of the guy would be linked to serious problems in his family. Junwon agrees and says that becoming an elite hunter was a great requirement of his father, but it was also the youth's dream. She notices that the manager knows a lot about other people's lives, and he smiles, saying that gossip is his long-time interest. The reception employee returns to the room, thanking them for the two's patience during the long wait for the new documents. The attendant asks if Junwon is recommending Wolfgang for an industrial scholarship, and the businessman confirms, smiling. The manager takes advantage of the partnership to request the total exemption of the tuition fees and the first semester's monthly payment. Yeren is impressed with the manager's cleverness, who assumes aloud that he preferred to buy a car to spending from his pocket. The attendant requests a few more extra documents for the exemption and invites the businessman to enter and sign the papers. Junwon asks for the redhead to wait for him at the place, and she accepts, impatient, demanding that he sign everything very quickly. The hunter is grateful for the economy with Wolfgang's studies, but admits to herself that it is difficult to like that manager. Yeren decides to focus on something else to distance the impatience and walks alone through the entrance corridor of the department. She looks again at the Hall of Fame frames, bothered by the mystery of the sudden disappearance of the famous hunter Jin Song. The young woman stares at the portrait of the former student, trying to understand why such a promising warrior would disappear from the map. At the office reception, the attendant asks the new guy who is waiting to sit while preparing his files. Junwon approaches to speak with the employee, but ends up noticing the youth of blue hair sitting alone on the sofa there. The manager stares at the guy from the back, intrigued with the strong sensation of having already seen that face somewhere else before. Suddenly, he widens his eyes in shock upon recognizing the facial features of the student, who turns to look in his direction. Junwon points the finger trembling and shouts, scared, wanting to know the reason the elite hunter is in that common place. He shouts the name of the famous Jin, Seong, demanding a logical explanation for his presence there in such a mysterious way. Far from there, Yeren recalls that the guy was heir to a commercial empire and considered a high-level prodigy in the country. She continues intrigued with the warrior's absence, but notices details in the photo that seem familiar to her as well. Meanwhile, in the corridor of rooms, the student of blue hair stares at the barbarian, feeling he already saw him somewhere else before. The youth of the backpack walks, irritated, grumbling that he didn't want to enter the room, but knows he cannot simply flee from there. He observes the professor's plate and complains with frustration for having to study in the specific class of demon hunters. Professor Kim Song Cheol appears silently from behind the youth, startling the guy upon asking the reason for the complaint. The student is startled by the appearance of the mysterious man who introduces himself with sympathy as the tutor responsible for the class. The tutor smiles warmly and confirms that he is the new student, Jin Woo, who enrolled for the special course this semester. The teacher wants to know the reason for the discontent, and Jin Woo complains that the class seems only a pack of sniffing dogs. Professor smiles, explaining that their work is dangerous and requires facing the monsters much before the other hunters. At that moment, Wolfgang approaches calmly from the group, calling attention and leaving the youth completely in a state of shock. Jin Woo points the finger, furious, in the direction of the giant, recognizing the barbarian who caused so much confusion at the Seoul Mall. The youth of the backpack runs, enraged, to attack Wolfgang, shouting that he is the culprit of all his terrible suffering. He shouts with pure hatred accumulated, swearing he will make him dearly for all the humiliations he passed because of him. Jin Woo tries to hit a powerful punch, but Wolfgang blocks the attack, holding his fist with just one of his hands in a very calm way. Wolfgang takes advantage of the gap to fight back and throws the youth against the floor with extreme ease. Wolfgang immobilizes the youth on the floor and notices a dark and strange mark stamped on his arm. Wolfgang asks if it was the Songshan Guild that sent him and warns he had already told them to come speak with him personally if they had something to say. Jin Woo shouts, irritated, calling the barbarian a rascal and demands that he release him immediately without saying nonsense. At that moment, a hand appears enveloped in a bright golden energy to intervene in the fight of the two. Enveloped by the professor's golden flames, Jin Woo shouts in pain, asking to be released before his arm ends up breaking. Wolfgang looks back a bit confused and questions the tutor about what he thinks he is doing. The professor gives a friendly laugh and comments he thought it better to separate the two students' fight. He suggests an alternative, explaining he doesn't want to lose the new students and remembers that fights at the academy can cause expulsion. The teacher then proposes an official duel under his supervision, since he noticed they have pending accounts and will not stop fighting. Outside the academy, Junwon finds Jin Seong and asks how he has been, but the guy replies with quite a bit of coldness. Jungwon comments he continues the same and asks if his guild is still looking for that mysterious power. Jin Song advises the old friend to stop that search immediately as a last friendly warning on his part. He adds that Jungwon is the one who should get rid of that useless horse insignia, since he barely manages to use it. Junwon retorts, saying the sacred relic is very useful against those who have a pact with demons, but admits the reunion is not pleasant. Jin Song suggests the two avoid bumping into each other again in the future, whenever possible. Junwon observes the ex-friend walking away in silence while Yeren continues waiting, sitting on the stone steps. Yeren stays watching from afar and wonders if that man talking to the manager was really the famous Jin Song. Back to the field, Wolfgang is indignant for having to fight using only the constellation's power and complains seriously to the professor. The tutor explains that demon hunters need to use stellar power with precision to manage to track the creatures. He compliments, saying that whoever doesn't master that strength cannot be a demon hunter, so he will use the test to evaluate them. Wolfgang asks what happens if they fight in another way, and the professor warns that the student can be transferred or even expelled. Jin Woo mocks the barbarian, asking if he really enrolled for the course without knowing such a basic rule as that. Wolfgang asks one more question to know if absolutely all the test actions in fact require the use of stellar power. The professor smiles and replies that, as it is only a training, he will allow other methods, since there is no direct physical contact. He warns that small injuries are normal, but it is forbidden to mutilate the adversary or put his life at real risk. In sequence, the professor turns to the youth of blue hair and asks if he has any doubt before starting the duel. Jin Woo gives a confident smile while a strong purple aura starts to surge around his body and asks to start soon. The youth confesses he is anxious to disfigure the barbarian's face as fast as possible with his blows. He extends the hand imbued with purple energy in the direction of the ball cart and tells the older man to take quite a lot of care. One of the tennis balls starts to float, enveloped in magic power, while the guy swears the adversary will pay dearly for having crossed his path. The tennis ball turns into a flaming sphere, fired directly against the direction of the barbarian. Wolfgang remains motionless while the fire attack explodes around him, raising a big curtain of black smoke. Jin Woo smiles victorious and asks if the barbarian liked his imitation of a real fireball. Wolfgang looks at his own damaged clothes by the flames and complains that his clothes being ruined quite problematic. Jin Woo shouts for the rival to give up if he finds it problematic and suggests, in a mocking manner, that he can forgive him if he begs. Wolfgang tries to speak with the professor for a moment, but Jin Woo gets irritated and accuses him of only trying to gain time. The barbarian gets quite impatient and grumbles to himself that he will need to hit the boy to make him listen. With an intimidating look, Wolfgang warns he will give only 1 minute for the youth to do absolutely everything he is capable of. Meanwhile, Junwan receives the document of total exemption of the monthly payments and thanks the employee before leaving with urine. The two start to descend the huge stone staircase of the renowned academy under the daylight. Taking advantage of the moment of tranquility, the redhead hunter asks if she can ask a doubt to the agency manager. She wants to know if something happened between them in the past, for she felt a quite strange and uncomfortable climate during the reunion. The manager smiles from the corner and explains that their relation is like that of common rivals, with a strange mix of admiration and resentment. The redhead asks if the feeling remains the same after so many years of graduation, and he agrees that time does not heal all things. Yerin comments that the situation seems quite complicated but highlights that she didn't feel they hated each other truly and in a pure way. Suddenly, the young redhead rushes and starts to descend the steps, running quickly in the direction of the academy's courtyard. Junwan observes the girl moving away running and reflects about what she said about their relation not being just hatred. The here Jin Seung observes from afar, aware that making peace with a former friend of truth will always be a quite difficult task. Jin Woo smiles in a provocative manner while showing one of his balls enveloped in flames and comments that that was just a simple imitation of a fireball. Wolfgang stares at the adversary with an extremely serious look and warns that he will give exactly 1 minute for the boy to show everything he knows. The barbarian challenges the youth to absolutely all the power he has at disposal without holding back in any moment. A devastating sequence of fire explosions hits the court with total force, while the professor observes everything from afar. The professor remains paralyzed and scared to see the gigantic and destructive proportion that sudden attack took. The tutor shouts, indignant, asking if the guy didn't pass the limits and remembers he had already given a very clear warning about that. Jin Woo rails, furious that Wolfgang ruined completely his contract with the constellation and ruined his life in some way. Professor uses his golden powers to contain the explosion's damages and warns the student to pray that the rival is not gravely injured. The teacher descends quickly in the direction of the field to disperse the black smoke with his strong bursts of magic energy. As the smoke dissipates, Wolfgang's imposing silhouette starts to surge intact in the middle of the destroyed courtyard. Wolfgang complains that his clothes were totally destroyed by the fire and laments the terrible durability of modern attire. Wolfgang extends his arm enveloped in a mysterious blue energy and asks for permission for a brief moment before acting. Through his projection, Wolfgang tells the assistants to deliver some new clothes and also the Fenrir wolf pelt for him to use. The barbarian dresses quickly while the professor observes the scene, impressed with the warrior's composure and power. Wolfgang throws the black wolf pelt on the battlefield ground right before Jin Woo, leaving the youth completely confused. Jin Woo shouts, scared, asking what type of strange ability that was and what that animal pelt thrown there meant. Wolfgang crouches in an imposing manner and warns that there exists something very strange that has been bothering him for quite a long time in that duel. He stares fixedly at the youth and reveals that the tattoo on his arm is, in truth, the manifestation of a malignant demon's power. Right in sequence, the barbarian jumps in a spectacular way in the direction of the skies, leaving the adversary perplexed looking toward the top. Wolfgang delivers a devastating punch that destroys the ground around and makes the boy recoil, terrified with the thunderous impact. After the scary blow, the barbarian warrior breathes deeply in a calm way and maintains a totally unshackable posture. The huge crater generated in the soil makes Jin Woo be thrown backward while he tries to protect his injured arm. Jin Woo holds his own arm, desperate, while the mysterious mark starts to burn and react intensely in a painful way. The professor widens his eyes, extremely scared, upon noticing what is really happening with the youth's body. The demon's mark on Jin Woo's arm glows in a vivid red and burns his skin, making the youth bellow in agony. Wolfgang observes the boy's painful reaction up close and questions himself mentally about the reason for that happening. Suddenly, a monstrous and colossal creature starts to materialize right behind Jin Woo, leaving him paralyzed with fear. The frightening beast Cerberus surges from the shadows, revealing that the legendary three-headed dog of the underworld was sealed in the youth. The demon warns Jin Woo that he is the only culprit for the end of the stellar contract and orders him to bow to Cerberus to recover his power. Desperate, Jin Woo cries Cerberus is a terrible demon that will demand a price too high and tries to refuse the malignant deal. However, his brother Jin Song stares at him coldly and affirms that he has no choice, for if he doesn't accept the deal with the monster, he will die. Back to the present, Jin Woo enters complete panic and shouts, desperate, for everyone to run before they are devoured by the beast. Wolfgang covers the youth's mouth in panic to calm him and orders firmly that he not allow fear to consume his mind. The warrior guarantees that no one will die there and teaches that the monster only gets stronger as it feeds on people's panic. Wolfgang warns that if he yields to fear, the demon will certainly charge a terrible price, consuming his own life expectancy. The barbarian remembers he already saw countless souls suffer after dark pacts and swears he will not allow that tragedy to repeat itself there. He orders that the youth control his breathing and face the terrible three-headed dog directly in the eyes in a courageous way. As Jin Woo sobs, saying he can't do it, the professor starts to charge his golden magic energy to intervene. Wolfgang focuses his attention on the monster and vows to prove that, depending on the strength of demons, will never be the path to true power. The tutor finds this year's pair of students fascinating, while Jin Woo stares, intrigued, at the wolf pelt Wolfgang brought to the field. At that instant, an overwhelming and extremely intimidating blue aura begins to emanate from the wolf pelt thrown on the ground. Both the young man and the professor are in absolute shock before the crushing presence that begins to manifest on the scene. The spirit of the legendary giant wolf appears majestically and comments that it noticed the change in the wind because Wolfgang had summoned it there. Wolfgang greets his old friend Fenrir and suggests testing if his fangs have gotten rusty, while the three-headed beast trembles in terror. Fenrir complains that the opponent has already lost all will to fight and questions the barbarian for calling him after so long for something so simple. Wolfgang denies it and explains that he summoned him to announce a new beginning, as he discovered that demons are still active in this new modern era. Fenrir reflects on the millennium that has already passed and notices that his friend is still strongly chained to the ghosts of the past. The wolf tells the warrior to take care of the dog alone while he gathers strength and says he will inform the other allies of the barbarian's return. Jin Woo slaps his own face in disbelief and wonders what kind of unbelievable and legendary event he has just witnessed with his own eyes. Far from all that confusion, the red-haired hunter Yeren finally arrives, running at the large Seoul Academy's outer parking lot. Yeren shouts, hurrying the manager to leave soon, complaining that her entire schedule is is late due to the delay with the paperwork. Jun-won interrupts the hunter's complaint and points strangely at something flying in the sky right above them. A gigantic sacred metal sword cuts through the sky, spinning rapidly toward the Academy's training field. Jun-won finds that flying weapon incredibly familiar, while Wolfgang looks up, relieved to see his weapon has finally arrived. Wolfgang watches the immense blade approaching slowly and comments sarcastically on the slowness of that ancient relic. The Barbarian points toward the object's fall, further frightening the terrible three-headed dog that continues to tremble. The immense battle sword plummets to the ground, embedding itself deep in the earth with a deafening impact. In the office, the professor explains that making pacts with demons is not illegal, and that hunters sometimes do it to make tracking easier. The tutor confesses he is very curious about the young man's military history, whose brother is an elite hunter, and whose father is a wealthy martial arts master. The tutor questions why the boy made a demonic pact, since with his family's wealth, it would be easy to get a sacred relic. Jin Woo lowers his head, embarrassed, and asks timidly if he really has to answer such a personal question. The professor clarifies that he needs to know the details to be able to help him as a counselor and reinforces how unjust demonic pacts are. He explains that the contract with Cerberus is so dangerous that it requires half of the user's remaining lifespan as payment. Wolfgang is completely stunned to hear this and shouts, startled by the seriousness of a pact that drains a person's own life force. Jin Woo begins to bend with his back turned and asks bitterly what the professor would do if he were treated as the unwanted child in the family. He recalls that everyone celebrated when his older brother got the contract with the descendant of the Barbarian constellation in the past. The young man adds that getting the support of that legendary foreign constellation became the main point of pride for his entire family. He explains that they were in such a good position that becoming the most powerful hunter family in Korea seemed only a matter of time. He reveals that although his father acts as a businessman today, the man's great dream in life was always to be a legendary martial artist. The boy says that the Stellar Pact ended up extending to the whole family, and it seemed his father's big dream would finally come true. In that golden age, everyone lived in a constant celebratory mood for their achievements, but things changed drastically afterward. The young man reveals with sadness that he, the second son with no talent and considered a disappointment, caused a great disaster that ended the contract. The boy points resentfully right at Wolfgang and yells angrily that everything went wrong because of that barbarian's actions. Wolfgang reacts very calmly and asks with sincere doubt how that family disaster could be his fault. In the past, the entity reveals it didn't care about the offenses, but rather the ignorance of those who didn't recognize Wolfgang's sovereign power. The mystical presence apologizes on behalf of the untalented youth and begs Wolfgang to forgive him for acting so foolishly and ignorantly. Wolfgang clarifies that his punishment had already ended there, that everything that happened after that was just a direct decision by the entity. The barbarian warrior comments that he forgave the young man but warns that he was using his legendary strength in a completely wrong and inappropriate way. The entity fully agrees with the barbarian and confirms that it was already planning to take severe measures regarding that situation. Wolfgang confesses he didn't imagine the contract would be voided, but reveals the spirit already had many doubts about the partnership with the family. Jin Woo shouts angrily, saying that's a lie because even though he was weak, his brother was an absolute genius who would never deserve to lose his power. The barbarian replies that he doesn't know his brother to judge, but guarantees that the boy himself was definitely not using the strength correctly. He explains that it's not about talent, but compatibility, because if they all use the strength that way, the barbarian was never an ideal match. The boy gets furious, points his finger at Wolfgang, and yells, wanting to know why he is wrong, repeating that his older brother was a genius. Suddenly, the office door is thrown open with a loud bang, and the older brother enters the room by surprise, startling everyone. Jin Woo's eyes go wide, completely paralyzed with shock to see his brother there right in front of him after so long. With an expression full of hatred and fury, Jin Song shouts, calling his brother a disgrace and demands that he leave that room immediately. Meanwhile, outside, the red-haired hunter Yeren continues to run hastily down the immense stone staircase staircases of the campus. Yurin shouts, hurrying her partner, warning that it will be a real disaster if Wolfgang ends a cop, causing another widespread confusion at the school. Junwan gets completely exhausted midway, almost getting sick from so much fatigue, and curses the enormous number of steps there. In the hallway, Jin Sung drags his younger brother by the collar while the boy cries, asking for forgiveness and promising he will fix the situation. Jin Woo desperately begs his older brother to stop dragging him in that humiliating way across the floor of the Seoul Academy. From an aerial perspective, you can see the elite hair dragging the younger one without any mercy across the outer stone courtyard. Very harshly, Seung throws his younger brother onto the school's garden grass, making the young man cry out in pain from the fall. Lying on the ground, Jin Woo sheds tears of pain and humiliation for being treated so cruelly by his own family member. Jin Sung shouts, telling the younger one to stop whimpering, and asks sarcastically if his hobby is ruining mystical contracts. The older one shoves his fallen brother and yells that he worked hard to get him into the school and complains about him breaking another precious pact. Back in the tutor's room, the professor walks beside the Barbarian and comments they barely got to talk about his enrollment due to the commotion. The professor says there is indeed a gigantic problem, and Wolfgang demands to know what it is, as he needs to become a demon hunter soon. The tutor gives a mysterious half-smile and reveals enigmatically that, actually, the real situation is the exact opposite of all that. Wolfgang remembers when the boy arrogantly challenged him on the court, telling him to admit defeat and get on his knees. Wolfgang asks the professor if he already knew everything, and the tutor confirms he sensed the demonic energy before, but was only sure at that moment. The professor gives a half-smile and boasts that he is better than any other active demon hunter when using a constellation's abilities. The professor admits that, despite his great experience, it took him a long time to detect the hidden evil aura around the student Jin Woo. The tutor explains that even though he felt the evil force, he only managed to identify it as Cerberus after the beast projected itself out of his body. Besides the young man's dark pact, the professor was surprised to notice that Wolfgang could also cause spatial distortions with his powers. He adds that the barbarian warrior demonstrated mastery of complex summoning magics for extremely powerful creatures. To complete his suspicions, the professor mentions that Wolfgang used what seemed to be a powerful telekinesis ability to move his weapon. Smiling, the tutor wants to know the real reason the warrior came to the academy, as he has never seen anyone master so many skills so easily. Wolfgang stares at the professor seriously and directly, asking what final conclusion he reached after witnessing all that. The tutor suggests he take the promotion exam to level up quickly, as he doubts the academy's regular classes have anything to teach. The barbarian furry firmly places a hand on the professor's shoulder to interrupt him, saying the only thing he really regrets at the moment is another situation. He focuses on the brother's problem, remembering how Jin Seong humiliated the younger one for ruining another precious agreement with the constellations. Outside, Yurin suddenly runs up and intervenes in the physical aggression, demanding to know what that elite hunter thinks he is doing. With an extremely indignant expression, the young redhead furiously questions why he is roughing up his own relative in the middle of the courtyard. Jin Sung reacts quite hostilely and tells Yurin to get out of the way immediately, asking who she thinks she is to interfere there. Junwan runs up to hold the aggressor by the arms, telling him to stop the aggression before he ends up seriously hurting his own younger brother. The manager tries to calm him down, reminding him that he never acted like this before, but the boy yells back, wanting to know why he cares about it. Jin Seong yells that if he doesn't take this drastic action, the boy will do something worse, but is interrupted by a hand that appears in the air. A hard, sharp slap strikes the elite hunter's face, completely interrupting his outburst of anger in front of everyone there. Wolfgang reveals himself to be responsible for the slap, leaving Junwan, Yurin, and the aggressor himself in a complete state of shock at the physical intervention. Wolfgang grips Jin Song's wrist with extreme force and reminds him that hunters are forbidden from fighting outside of dungeons under the risk of expulsion. Professor Xiang Keel appears silently right behind the group with a serious expression to take control of that tense situation. The tutor warns that the boy dragged his new student away right before his eyes, and without asking for his proper permission before doing so. With a cold smile on his face, the teacher firmly advises the elite hunter to stop that stupid attitude immediately. The professor's gaze glows intensely and darkly as he threatens to make way for a duel right there, knowing the boy wanted to fight. Surprised by the revelation, Jin Sung questions the tutor suspiciously upon hearing the man refer to the younger one as his own official student. He remembers that his younger brother still doesn't have any kind of active mystical contract and doesn't understand how the academy would accept someone in that condition. The professor calmly replies that having a mystical contract doesn't matter one bit when it comes to accepting him as his new disciple at the academy. Jin Song remains silent, just staring very seriously at the professor while processing everything he just heard in the courtyard. The tutor returns the penetrating gaze, maintaining a serene and unshakable expression that shows all his authority as an elite master. Seeing he has no other plausible option, Jin Sung finally gives in, lowers his guard, and respectfully asks them to accept the younger one's enrollment. After making the humble request, the elite hunter turns his back and begins to walk alone toward the exit of the academy campus. In the academy's infirmary, the professor explains to Yeren that the place is protected by magical barriers that speed up the healing of minor injuries. The master sighs and comments with concern that Jin Woo's real problem from now on lies in the deep pain and traumas of his heart. Yeren becomes thoughtful and deduces that all of the boy's anguish must be strongly related to his older brother's aggressive behavior. Professor Song Kia looks away with a serene expression and acts mysterious, commenting vaguely about that family's secrets. Jin Woo is remembered in his frustration, insisting that his brother was too perfect to fail, and that he is the one who should have been truly punished. The boy remained unconvinced in his mind about losing the stellar power and tirelessly repeated how incredible his brother was. Jin Seong recalls the conversation he had with the professor, intrigued by the master's insistence on taking in a boy who didn't even have a contract. He relives in his thoughts the exact moment when he had to swallow his own family pride to beg for his younger brother's admission. The tutor reflects with understanding that there are definitely very deep family secrets that only the two brothers share. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, Wolfgang decides he has done his part there, opens the door, and tells the others he is leaving for good. Yaren asks if he collected Cerberus's remains, and Wolfgang confirms it, warning that no one should touch it due to the dangerous dark aura. Outside the academy, Junwon catches up with Jin Seong in the parking lot and yells, irritated with his rough actions, saying they should resolve it at home. Junwon reminds him that they are blood brothers, but the elite hunter coldly retorts for the manager not to meddle in family matters. The manager questions if his drastic change in behavior is related to his recent disappearance, but the boy warns him not to jump to conclusions. Junwon retorts, wanting to know what kind of reason would justify roughing up a relative, and questions him about his recent secret investigations. Ignoring the manager's questions, Jin Sung silently gets into his luxurious black car under the sunset light in the parking lot. Jin Seong asks why he stopped investigating his father's secret past, and Junwon sadly reveals that he left the association for good. Jin Sung questions if the Hunter Association already knows the secret that his own father did indeed touch that dark power. Junwon confesses that he omitted the details in his official report and warns that the association would be furious if they found out the truth now. The manager adds that the association's biggest concern would be discovering that the boy's father is using a demon's strength. Jin Seong concludes that his former friend decided not report the crime to the association solely to protect him in some way. He is confused, not knowing whether to express gratitude for the help or to hold resentment for this whole complicated situation. Junwon remains motionless, watching the black vehicle drive away slowly down the road under the orange late afternoon sky. The scene changes to the imposing, illuminated stone sign of the country's great association of archaeology hunters. Back at the department, the young assistant is surprised and confused to hear that Wolfgang wants to forge armor with Cerberus's remains. The Barbarian confirms his intention while drinking soda and asks if they know any skilled blacksmiths in the region to recommend. Yeren asks the assistant to explain everything to Wolfgang, as she also doesn't understand much about this manufacturing area. The young man explains that nowadays hunters no longer use blacksmiths, but instead sell the materials on the market to buy ready-made items. Yeren suggests they take pictures of the monster to advertise the sale, but warns that her transaction fees are very expensive because she rarely uses the network. The young assistant agrees to post the ad on the market in exchange for Yeren's promise to help him with his research in the near future. When asked what kind of equipment he would like to buy with the money from the sale, Wolfgang replies that he actually doesn't need anything. Yeren and the assistant look at each other, completely intrigued, and ask with surprise who the equipment would be, for if the Barbarian himself wouldn't use it. In a large executive room, the secretary informs the conglomerate's president that the Cerberus hide has been advertised and that Jin Wu has disappeared. The powerful president of the conglomerate reacts angrily upon hearing that his youngest son has not yet returned after the terrible disaster at the school. The employee reports that Cerberus was taken out in a duel against Wolfgang, that Jin Seong roughed up his brother before the boy was hospitalized. The patriarch roars the Barbarian's name and coldly orders them to send a secret cleaner to take out Wolfgang once and for all without leaving a trace. He ponders about his sons and concludes that to keep Jin Seong's mental sanity stable, they will need to keep Jin Wu alive no matter what. The patriarch orders them to bring Jin Wu back immediately, while the older heir listens to the dark conversation from outside the room. Noticing the silent presence of his older son nearby, the father authoritatively orders him to stop where he is in the hallway. The president asks how long the young man had been listening to the meeting, and Jin Seong tries to play it off, startled, claiming he had just arrived. The father warns that he doesn't need to feign ignorance about the facts, causing Jin Seong to bow his head and apologize submissively. With a greedy and frightening expression, the man states that the entity will soon awaken and that all the power in this world will belong to his family. Jin Seong trembles with dread and feels a chill at the madness and immense thirst for power so explicitly shown by his own father. The young elite hunter decides to leave the executive room in a hurry to escape that extremely suffocating and oppressive atmosphere. The businessman orders his chief secretary to start closely monitoring the actions and steps of his own older son from now on. In the infirmary bed at the academy, the young Jin Wu lets out a deep and painful sigh as he stares at the ceiling of the hospital room. He remembers when his brother gave him the mysterious drawing in the past, explaining that it was a magic tattoo of the monster Cerberus. The older one ordered him to mark that figure on his skin to be able to seal the demonic pact and regain a large portion of power. Jin Seong explained that by accepting the demon's harsh demands, he could easily become at least an elite rank sea hunter. At the time, the younger one tried to refuse the absurd idea, finding it wrong to make demonic pacts, but his brother insisted he needed to act quickly. Jin Seong coldly warned that he would be taken care of if he didn't do it, reminding him how cruel their father is to those who disappoint him. He revealed with bitterness that the patriarch would take care of his own sons without hesitation, and that the pact with the creature was the only way to ensure his life. The young man revealed that his father had been trying for years to awaken a colossal dark force that would make the Hunter Association itself irrelevant. Jin Wu suggested asking their friend from the association for help to restrain their father, fearing he would lose half his life due to the pact's terrible rules. With a completely dark and saddened look, Jin Seong replied with his head down that it was impossible to take such a drastic step at that moment. He began to cry in despair, admitting that if he did something like that, his precious childhood friend would certainly be taken out by their father. The older one begged the younger to obey the orders, guaranteeing that it was the only viable alternative for everyone to survive. Remembering all that past family suffering, Jin Wu shed silent tears in the hospital room and whispers for his brother. Suddenly, the projection of a magical hand mysteriously appears through a bright blue portal right beside his bed in the infirmary. The young man is terrified to see the floating hand and screams in panic, thinking it's a ghost invading the hospital room. Wolfgang tells the boy to surrender quietly, as the mystical hand grabs him, leading to protests from the youth and surprise from witnesses in the room. Under the dark cover of the starry night, a suspicious and camouflaged silhouette moves nimbly and silently up the huge academy staircases. It is Jin Seong, disguised in a mask and cap, running hurriedly up the steps, knowing he must act fast before his cruel father takes any action. In the main director's office, Professor Song Cheel stretches tiredly and murmurs reflectively that the time had come. At that exact moment, Jin Song's swift shadow runs silently and nimbly past the outside of the master's large glass window. The professor watches the nighttime movement with suspicion and mentally questions why Jin Seong is acting so sneakily. The masked intruder carefully opens the infirmary door and spots Wolfgang's magical hand pulling Jin Woo into the blue dimensional rift. Jin Song silently enters the academy infirmary and wonders if this is really the correct room. Cautiously, so as not to make a sound, he pulls back the curtain protecting the hospital bed in the school. The elite hunter is surprised to look at the empty bed and immediately realize that his younger brother is gone. Jin Song curses in frustration, admitting he never considered the possibility of him not being in bed, and wonders where he went. Suddenly, the boy's body begins to float, enveloped in the familiar magical golden aura, leaving him completely startled. Professor Song Cheel enters the room, revealing that he already suspected him and confirms that it was indeed Jin Sung there. The master in the white robe seriously orders the boy to follow him in silence, unless he wants to cause a big scandal. In the other department, Jin Woo shrinks to the floor, scared, as Wolfgang approaches him again in an intimidating manner. Wolfgang announces he will make him his first subordinate and orders him to take off his clothes for measurements, terrifying the boy. Wolfgang offers the chance to get a new pact with the descendant of the Barbarian constellation instead of submitting to a demon's darkness. Jin Woo's eyes widen with immense hope, and he asks if he would really be able to renew the contract with the deity. Wolfgang clarifies that he can't give absolute guarantees, but states that if he proves himself a worthy warrior, there will be justification for it. The young blue-haired hunter is speechless, completely impacted, and moved by that unique opportunity in his life. A slight smile of relief and determination finally begins to appear on the boy's face after so many months of living in suffering. Emotionally, Jin Woo falls to his knees before Wolfgang and desperately begs him to teach him how to become a worthy warrior. Wolfgang assumes a solemn posture and announces that, from that moment on, the boy will be reborn as the most powerful shield warrior in the world. However, Jin Woo blinks, confused, upon hearing that and asks strangely what kind of shield warrior the barbarian was suggesting. The young assistant confirms he has taken all of Jin Woo's necessary measurements and asks if he just needs to buy the right equipment. Wolfgang specifies that they need a large, sturdy shield exactly his size, saying the rest doesn't matter as much. The assistant celebrates, saying they have already received a purchase offer for Cerberus's carcass, which guarantees enough money for the item. Wolfgang advises that they should inspect the actual product on the market first, and Yeren is startled to hear he wants to do it right now. Carrying the heavy materials on his back, Jin Woo becomes thoughtful and fears that his own father was the hidden buyer on the market. With sweat running down his worried face, the youngest hunter silently hopes that his worst family suspicions are wrong. As they walk, Yeren notices a vibration on her phone and says she received an urgent message from one of the academy's professors. The red-haired hunter presses her device's screen to open the notification and check the secret information sent by the teacher. In the office room, the professor in the white robe floats serenely before Jin Song and demands that the young man tell him the whole truth. He wants to know if the young man did indeed seek a new demonic mark to force his younger brother into another dangerous pact, warning about the price. Noticing the young man in the cap's embarrassed-eyed silence, the master concludes he doesn't want to answer and comments with understanding that perhaps it's for the best. The professor offers to help them escape, but Jin Song seriously asks him not to get involved, as it is dangerous even for the master. Upon reading on his phone that the younger one is safe with the archaeology team, the master changes his tone and coldly warns he will no longer accept Jin Woo at the school. Jin Sung becomes desperate upon hearing the professor's refusal and shouts, demanding an explanation, reminding him that he had promised to take in his brother. The master explains sternly that demon hunters must be ready for the worst and questions how he can trust someone who uses the school as a shelter. Ponders that he might even help them use the school as a secret refuge, but demands a clear and sincere explanation of their real situation. The young man sits down and begins to tell his past, revealing that although his father is a famous martial artist, he was never chosen by the gods. He explains that in today's world of hunters, his wealthy father lived in frustration, saying money couldn't buy everything until his own contract fell apart. He shows an invitation envelope for an elite event and events that they told him not to attend after discovering he had lost the mystical pact. The young man in the cap points out that his father is not the type of man to accept defeat silently, and says the master can probably guess what happened. Professor Song Cheol's eyes widen as he deduces the terrible truth and concludes with shock that the businessman made a pact with a colossal demon. The young man laments that the situation got out of control and questions if the Hunter Association itself would actually have the courage to act against his powerful father. The master understands the gravity, but questions why he pressured Jin Woo so much if the father's fury would only fall upon the heir without a contract. He confesses with deep pain that his father tried to get rid of Jin Woo after the mystical failure, which is why he offered the pact with Cerberus to save the younger one's life. He grips his backpack straps tightly and cries as he reveals that he roughed up his brother to prevent their father from acting and doing something infinitely worse to him. With a devastated expression, the young heir whispers that despite all his desperate efforts, his father ended up deciding to call in the dreaded cleaner. Professor Song Cheol stands up furiously, slamming the table, and wants to know if he was referring to that dreaded criminal faction of elite rank hunters. The young man confirms the information seriously and warns the teacher that the organization of ruthless assassins is too strong for even the master to handle. He states that he accepts being blamed and hated by everyone if necessary, as long as his younger brother can stay alive and safe from their father's clutches. Faced with that frightening revelation about the criminal empire, the professor leans on the table in shock, admitting the situation has truly gotten out of control. In his thoughts, Jin Song bitterly laments and concludes that none of this would have happened if he still had his valuable divine contract active. With tears streaming down, he assures the master that even if Jin Woo made a mistake, he could never just watch his father take down his younger brother. With an expression filled with pure fury and determination, Jin Seong vows to put an end to this terrible and dangerous family problem once and for all. The next day, the routine begins again as usual amidst the city's tall buildings. Jin Woo appears with a tired and thoughtful expression as he waits for his training to begin. Junwon shows up, all smiles, bringing a massive metal shield as a gift for the young hunter. Wolfgang tosses the heavy equipment into the air and assures him it's ideal for beginners. Jin Woo examines the shield up close, but complains that he'd prefer to use cooler weapons like swords. Wolfgang warns the young man about his limits and says he couldn't even scratch a demon. He explains that focusing on defense with the shield ensures his survival, but the boy gets irritated. The Barbarian sincerely confirms it and points out that the youth still doesn't know how to use all of his mystical power. Wolfgang recalls the previous duel and acknowledges that the boy's punches have decent strength, but he explains that it's necessary to channel the body's energy at the exact moment of impact. That way, the boy wouldn't have needed to resort to dangerous demonic powers in the previous fight. Listening to the Barbarian's valuable advice, the young hunter stares at the new reflective shield in silence. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the luxurious and immense mansion of President Kim Tagwan. In the depths of the residence, a dark staircase leads down to a basement where something terrible is prepared. The president cuts his own hand with a blade under the tense gaze of his two elite aides. Furious with the Hunter Association, he vows to become the strongest through a dark pact. The man lets his own darkened fluid drip toward the mysterious altar prepared on the floor. Each drop of fluid spilled into the container begins an ancient and forbidden dark invocation. An immense red magical circle begins to glow intensely throughout the entire underground hall. The president calls for the Father of Darkness and offers his own essence as a ritualistic offering. He curses the hypocrisy of the current world and wishes for the complete destruction of the Order of Light. The sky above the mansion begins to close in with a terrible and frightening dark storm. The greedy aides celebrate, thinking of the immense fortune they will accumulate with this new power. The profane offering of flesh and essence continues to feed the powerful magic seal on the basement floor. He orders the gates of the sealed abyss to open at once for the descent of the evil entity. An explosion of pure dark energy announces the dreaded arrival of the terrible sovereign of darkness. A monstrous claw emerges from the altar and startles the businessman himself with its overwhelming presence. The president screams in despair upon realizing the summoned demon is not something he can control. The demonic mass of flesh advances quickly and begins to engulf the desperate man's face. With his eyes paralyzed in terror, he lets out a final groan of agony as he is entirely consumed. The assistants who watched it all are in complete shock and realize the terrible mistake they made. Screams of pain echo through the room as the macabre mutation spreads uncontrollably. A colossal chained demon appears in place of the former president under the terrified gaze of the couple. The man tries to call for his boss, but a swift chain strikes his companion's chest. He watches in horror as his partner's essence is spilled before his eyes. The demonic sovereign roars and pulls the chain that traps the soul of its first victim in the hall. The monster lifts the woman's lifeless body into the air, showing its total lack of pity. The remaining aide cries out desperately for his beloved as tears stream down his face. The terrible jaw of the demon opens, revealing rows of sharp teeth ready for the feast. The creature cruelly consumes the victim, causing sprays of dark fluid to stain the entire place. With a red glow in its eye, the creature shows that it has regained part of its strength. The president's consciousness tries to resist in the back of the monster's mind, but realizes it has lost control. In a moment of lucidity, he desperately begs for someone to be called to stop him. The man mentally pleads for them to notify his son, or any hunter capable of ending this madness. He makes his last desperate plea before completely losing consciousness to the beast. Under the sinister light of a blood moon, Jin's song and the professor observe the city's cloudy sky. The tutor is shocked by the sudden climate change and questions what is actually happening. Jin Seong feels a tightness in his chest and senses that his father's ambition has crossed the point of no return. The secretary calls desperately on his cell phone, telling the young master that a major emergency has occurred. Upon hearing the employee's report, the young man realizes with horror that his father has finally completed the dreaded ritual. Wolfgang and his companions gather in the basement of the Archaeology Hunter Association to train. Jin Woo complains about the improvised location, but the master explains that they don't have a dedicated training space. The Barbarian asks him to calm down and points out that the youth gets easily worked up in combat, completely losing his balance. He shows how this basic mistake leaves the opponent's body completely exposed to a counter-attack. Determined to improve his stance, the boy takes a deep breath and decides to test the instructions he received. Jin Woo wields the large metal shield and prepares himself firmly to receive the master's blow. Wolfgang tells him to lower his stance and advances with a punch that was supposed to be just a light blow. The impact of the fist generates an overwhelming shockwave that makes Yeren shield her face. Startled, the young hunter grits his teeth and tries his best to withstand the incredible pressure of the punch. The collision destroys the storage boxes and scatters debris throughout the room due to the absurd force. An immense white light covers the entire place after the devastating impact of Wolfgang's fist on the shield. Jinwoo gasps for breath, exhausted, and indignantly questions if that a brutal blow was what the master called light. Wolfgang cracks his knuckles and praises the boy for remaining on his feet, even after receiving that strong impact. The storage room is in ruins, with papers flying everywhere, leaving Yeren and the rookie speechless. The barbarian tells him to memorize that physical sensation and says he will observe the training from a distance. Yaren praises Wolfgang's seriousness, and he remembers that the boy did very well in his promotion exam. The warrior remembers with a cold sweat that he almost broke the testing machine, and the girl just laughs awkwardly. In the middle of training, the cell phone forgotten on the table starts to vibrate nonstop. Jin stops the exercise and quickly answers the call to find out what is happening. Wolfgang complains that his defensive stance fell apart the moment he got distracted by the call. Upon hearing the terrible news on the other end of the line, the boy shouts in complete, disbelieving shock. Desperate, the young hunter says he needs to rush home and dashes out the door. Wolfgang and Yeren watch their companion leave with a bad feeling that something very serious has happened. Elsewhere in the city, Professor Song Chil screams in horror upon learning of the demonic descent ritual. Jin Song confirms the facts with sadness and deeply regrets the terrible decision his father made. The desperate secretary suggests they run to try to stop the president before it's too late. The young man wants to handle this as a family matter, but the master warns that the threat is now global. Jin Sung insists that the tutor alert the association, as a common hunter would not be heard immediately. The secretary cries for his missing wife, but the young man asks him to calm down and says he will look for her personally. The trio quickly splits up and runs through the dark city streets to try to contain the catastrophe. In the archaeology basement, Wolfgang senses a strange energy and decides he needs to leave immediately. Yeren jokes, thinking he wants to escape the cleanup, but soon notices the seriousness in the warrior's eyes. When they go outside, they are faced with the daytime sky completely obscured by dark, mysterious clouds. Wolfgang stares at the darkness above him and recognizes the terrible and repulsive energy emanating from the horizon. The barbarian states that a real demon has appeared, leaving his red-haired companion in complete shock. She explains that a physical summoning on Earth is infinitely worse than a simple pact sealed from afar. The warrior warns grimly that the rules of the world have completely changed from that moment on. Wolfgang releases his bright aura and prepares himself, knowing that a large-scale invasion is about to begin. A mysterious message echoes through the shadows, indicating that this terrible revenge has waited for 1,000 years. Jin Song runs desperately, cutting through the city's corners toward his family's mansion. In a cold sweat, the young elite hunter prays mentally that he doesn't arrive too late at the ritual site. He finally reaches the immense door of the residence and hastily places his hand on the metal lock. As he pushes the entrance open, the young man recoils, startled by the intense red energy consuming the interior. The floor of the luxurious mansion begins to crack open, revealing fissures filled with pure, burning demonic power. A gigantic column of flames explodes from the center of the room, sending debris and dust flying everywhere. Jin Song shields his eyes from the extreme heat and fears the worst as he desperately calls out for his father. The young man stares at the epicenter of the explosion through the ashes with a look filled with pure determination and panic. As he focuses his vision on the dense smoke, the boy's eyes widen in complete terror as he glimpses the creature. An immense tower of red energy pierces the city skies under the frightening light of a blood moon. A colossal stone blade descends from the heights and collides with the ground, creating a deafening roar. Wolfgang wields his great legendary sword and seriously orders Yeren to find a safe shelter immediately. Worried, the red-haired hunter tells him to be careful and reminds him that the association will soon send reinforcements to help. The barbarian stomps his foot hard against the ground, which completely shatters under the absurd physical pressure. Wolfgang takes a running start and leaps toward the heavens, wielding his ancestral sword with immense determination. Aiming for the flames in the distance, the warrior vows to hunt the demons, proclaiming that the last barbarian is coming. Meanwhile, the president's mansion is consumed by dark smoke and ash amidst complete destruction. Injured and covered in blood, the young Jing seemed to catch his breath amidst the rubble of the site. Desperate, the young man shouts for his father to resist the demonic influence and regain control of his own mind. In response, a heavy and swift metal chain is shot from the shadows directly at the young hunter. Jin Sung is brutally hit by the strong impact of the metal and lets out a cry of pain as he is thrown far away. The monster's claw manipulates the chain and warns coldly that the one he called father no longer exists. The monster advances toward the kneeling young man and orders frighteningly that he not lose hope. The red-eyed creature vows that after consuming his and his father's soul, it will wipe out every last human. The monster's claw manipulates the chain and coldly warns that the one he called father is no more. The monster advances toward the kneeling young man and frighteningly orders him to feel no resentment. The terrible demon clenches its iron fist and guarantees it will annihilate the entire human race, starting with him. Jin Sung cries out for his father to come to his senses, but the creature mocks his attitude, calling him a fool. The sovereign of darkness unleashes a devastating blow with its chain spear, coldly ordering him to perish. Badly injured, the young man refuses to accept defeat and tries to defend himself with the little strength he has left. Suddenly, a strong shield block intercepts the final blow, creating an intense shower of sparks in the hall. Jin Seong opens his eyes, surprised to realize his younger brother has stepped in front of him to save him. Jin Woo smiles confidently and assures his brother that this time, he will be the one to protect him from danger. Meanwhile, in a Ranka dungeon in China, the elite hunters Shi Hao and Yan Jiang are finishing their mission. A gigantic eastern dragon emerges from the shadows, roaring and firing a devastating breath of fire toward them. Yan Jiang reacts quickly, activating a blue energy shield and telling her companion to take cover behind her. The terrible firestorm collides with the barrier, creating an absurd explosion that consumes the entire scene. Shi Hao praises his partner's flawless defense as she prepares to withstand the pressure of the enemy's attack. Taking advantage of the opening, the young hunter leaps toward the monster, raising his spear to deliver the final blow. He brutally strikes the dragon's head with his weapon, channeling all his spiritual energy into the impact. The creature lets out one last shriek of agony and collapses, defeated, on the stone floor of the Chinese dungeon. The two youth celebrate the mission's success, extremely proud to have cleared a rank A dungeon. They celebrate in a fun pose, claiming with total certainty that they are indeed the best hunters. However, the joy is short-lived, and Yan Jiang is suddenly struck from behind by a swift and invisible blade. The girl gasps in deep shock, not even understanding where that cowardly and devastating attack came from. She falls lifeless into the arms of her desperate companion, who screams her name, overcome with pure despair. Right after, Shi Hao himself is struck by a lethal blow with no chance to defend himself. In his final moments, the hunter realizes he couldn't even see the assassin's swift movement. The pair falls, eliminated, on the ground while the assassin emerges from the shadows holding a dagger. The cleaner calls to report the success of the job and says he will leave immediately to eliminate the next target. He checks his phone screen, revealing that the next hunter marked for elimination is the experienced Wolfgang. From the top of a building, the villain observes the red sky and thinks that this urban chaos will make his infiltration easier. He analyzes that the target is only rank F, but deduces there must be something special for them to hire his services. The assassin prepares to strike from behind, guaranteeing he will finish the Barbarian with a single, precise blow. However, Wolfgang senses the approach and blocks the enemy's hidden weapon with his sword, creating a strong impact. A cloud of green, poisonous smoke quickly spreads around the Barbarian after the collision. The warrior begins to cough amidst the toxic gas while the villain approaches, believing he has won the duel. The cleaner mocks the Barbarian, but his constellation sends an urgent warning, demanding that he retreat immediately. He looks back, confused, and is met with the frightening silhouette of the Barbarian with his eyes glowing red. With a single, devastating sword movement, Wolfgang slashes the assassin's chest, sending him reeling. The assassin gasps upon noticing that the deadly poison had no effect whatsoever against the warrior's body. The barbarian warns intimidatingly that he is the only hunter there and orders no one to interfere in his hunt. Back to the main fight, the monster's sharp chains fly swiftly through the scene in search of the victims. Jin Woo uses all his strength to block the successive metallic attacks, using his sturdy shield. The younger brother positions himself protectively in front of his injured brother and asks if he is in any condition to fight. He remembers Wolfgang's advice about staying calm, but is surprised by a new beast that advances quickly. The smaller demon strikes the shield violently, destabilizing the young man's defense and knocking him to the ground. The two brothers end up falling together on the cracked ground while the creature roars victoriously before them. Jin Woo gets up quickly, wielding the shield, and asks, startled, what that new creature could be. He looks around in total panic, not understanding where so many monsters are appearing from simultaneously. The camera reveals a colossal rift filled with burning flames from which hundreds of demons begin to crawl out. The cracked ground shakes violently as the portal to the abyss opens wider and wider in the city. An immense and frightening demonic claw rests on the edge of the rift, announcing the arrival of something colossal. A true horde of terrifying monsters emerges from the depths, ready to begin the great invasion. Jin Woo trembles with fear upon realizing the number of monsters coming out of the rift is infinitely greater than he imagined. A huge horde of bizarre creatures, including a stone golem, relentlessly advances toward the fallen hunter. The young man forces himself to focus and vows to himself that he cannot give up now, or his older brother will end up perishing. The colossal stone golem delivers a devastating punch that collides directly with Jin Woo's metal shield. The young man grits his teeth and applies all his physical strength to resist the enormous pressure of the enemy's blow. Lying on the ground and nearly out of strength, Jin Sung watches his younger brother's desperate effort to defend them. The younger one lets out a furious cry, determined to hold the defensive position firmly until reinforcements arrive. He braces his body against the cracked shield and endures the violent impacts from the giant creature's rock fists. Using a counter-attack move, Jin Woo spins his body and strikes the golem with the edge of his own shield. He then uses the equipment to block and repel the attack of a nasty acidic slime coming from the side. With great determination, the boy advances and strikes the approaching monsters, trying to hold the line of defense. Suddenly, a bizarre purple creature full of tentacles leaps with its jaw open to devour the boy. The monster bites the shield with extreme violence, shattering the valuable defensive equipment into dozens of pieces. Jin Woo panics upon seeing his only weapon destroyed, knowing he needs to stay on his feet to save his brother. The beast prepares to deliver the final blow, advancing on the defenseless young hunter. Suddenly, a gigantic sword descends from the heavens with absurd force, splitting the monster in half in a devastating manner. Jin Woo is paralyzed with surprise to see the immense weapon and embedded in the destroyed ground right before his eyes. The famous sword with Jonas's skull is stuck in the ground, creating a large curtain of dust and smoke. Wolfgang emerges from the dust and praises the boy's effort, calling him his #1 subordinate. The barbarian states that he has proven himself a true warrior worthy of wielding a shield to protect his allies. Jin Woo feels immense relief upon seeing his master, while the warrior easily pulls out the heavy sword. Wolfgang positions himself in front of the injured brothers, facing the frightening horde of demons advancing down the avenue. With his eyes glowing blue and teeth clenched, the barbarian shows all his fury against the invaders. The legendary warrior charges forward, roaring, and unleashes a powerful sword strike that cuts through the air with mystical energy. A gigantic blue shockwave is released, sweeping away and pulverizing dozens of demons instantly. The beasts' heads are sliced by the extreme speed of the attack, demonstrating the barbarian's overwhelming power. Wolfgang calmly turns around and orders the boy to rest, as he will take control of the battle from here on out. The gigantic demon lord takes advantage of the distraction to launch its dangerous chains toward the warrior. However, Wolfgang reacts immediately and blocks the metallic lunges, creating a huge wave of energy in the air. The barbarian smiles with disdain amidst the enemy's attacks and says he will personally take care of the Sovereign of Darkness. The monster roars with hatred and pulls its red chains, trying to trap the powerful warrior by any means. Wolfgang blocks the brutal lunge with his sword, creating a strong impact that shakes the entire cracked ground. Unsnared by the heavy metal chains, the hero just laughs with disdain and guarantees he will win this fight alone. Wolfgang demands that the beast reveal everything it knows about the demons, promising a painless end in return. The demon lord lets out a sarcastic laugh and questions how a mere human insect dares to speak to him in such a way. The warrior retorts coldly, saying that if he refuses the offer, he will be brutally erased from existence. Furious, the monster insults the barbarian, calling him a miserable worm, and challenges him to try and take him down if he is able. The creature conjures a terrible shadow magic that traps Wolfgang's movements with bands of red energy. Wolfgang flexes his immense muscles to resist the paralysis and scoffs at the enemy, calling the spell a cheap trick. The demon lord orders the ignorant human to be crushed by the mystical pressure of its binding shadows. Wolfgang lets out a fierce roar and begins to break the energy chains using only his overwhelming brute force. The giant demon's eyes widen in surprise as it realizes the warrior is resisting its dark spell. The bands of mystical energy begin to snap and break completely under the hero's unbelievable physical pressure. With a violent crack, all the shadow chains are shattered at once, freeing the legendary warrior. Wolfgang charges forward with extreme speed, enveloped in a powerful blue aura that cuts through the air like a bright comet. The monster recognizes he is no ordinary human but tries to counter, attack before being hit by the warrior. An immense beam of blue light tears through the curtain of smoke, heralding the fatal charge of Jonas's powerful sword. Wolfgang appears in the air, holding the hilt of his immense mystical weapon with both hands to deliver a vertical slash. The blade strikes the demon lord's chest head-on, creating an extremely bright explosion of blue energy. The terrible giant lets out a roar of pain and terror as it feels the overwhelming force of Wolfgang's sacred slash. The demon lord staggers back from the cut, while Wolfgang watches him with his huge sword resting on his shoulder. The barbarian scoffs at his adversary, saying he is so weak it's not even worth remembering his name. Offended and furious, the demon Ombrax rages against the hunter's insolence and orders his immediate demise. A gigantic stone golem awakens and rises right behind Wolfgang, preparing a powerful, crushing punch. Carrying his brother on his back, Jin, Wu senses the imminent danger and desperately shouts for the barbarian to be careful. The immense rock fist descends at high speed toward the warrior, who remains calm in the face of the threat. Wolfgang clenches his teeth with determination and prepares to deliver a single, powerful punch against the monster. The hunter pierces and shatters the giant golem's stone chest with an overwhelming punch that scatters debris. Watching the scene from afar, the young Jin, Wu is perplexed by such a display of brute force from his master. At that exact moment, the completely shocked young man understands that he must do everything he can to not annoy the barbarian. The boy decides that his highest survival priority from now on is to always please the frightening warrior. A large explosion of energy makes the boy run desperately with his brother through the ruined city streets. Wolfgang turns and sharply orders the boy to get out of there quickly and take his injured brother to a safe place. Jin, who replies promptly and mentally thanks his lucky stars for having such a powerful and intimidating ally on his side. Ombrax is aghast at the barbarian's strength and realizes he will have to use his true spiritual form in combat. A red smoke of pure dark energy envelops the monster's body while the warrior waits patiently. The demon lord activates its shadow evolution, assuming a new and frightening appearance of a dark warrior. Wolfgang observes the drastic change, unimpressed, commenting ironically on the opponent's tricks. The monster advances at high speed, delivering lethal blows with its sharp red claws against the hero. Wolfgang raises his gigantic sword with both hands, preparing to counter the creature's furious charge. The demon attacks repeatedly from various directions, creating a storm of red slashes around the warrior. Jin Woo watches in horror and complains that the monster is cheating by turning its body into untouchable smoke. The demon's red smoke envelopes Wolfgang, descending upon him from above with absurd speed and pressure. The monster scoffs at the hero, asking if he actually thought he could harm a spiritual entity. Maintaining his calm posture amidst the chaos, the barbarian analyzes the enemy's movements to devise a plan of attack. The demon lord roars, irritated by the human's tranquility, and prepares to deliver a final blow. The monster fiercely advances through the cracks in the ground, unable to tolerate the Barbarian warrior's provocations and taunts. The creature attacks with all its dark force, ordering with hatred for the insolent worm to perish at once. In a memory, Wolfgang recalls Jonas's advice about demons that use shadows and mist to confuse. Jonas guarantees that such mystical tricks are useless against his legendary hammer, blessed with the power of thunder. Wolfgang draws Jonas's golden hammer and blocks the demon's dark blow, generating a wave of golden lightning. Almbrax panics as his attack is blocked by a human and begins to deduce the origin of that divine weapon. The demon realizes with terror that it is a weapon blessed by angels. While Wolfgang holds the handle firmly, the warrior holds the weapon with both hands and mentally thanks his fallen companion for that gift. The demon lord roars in desperation upon realizing that powerful sacred relic is capable of destroying its soul. Wolfgang strikes the ground, unleashing an immense storm of golden lightning that envelops and consumes the monster. An explosion of white light and mystical electricity consumes the entire combat area, eliminating the shadows from the place. Enveloped by the sacred energy of Jonas's hammer, the demon screams in pain and agony as its body dissolves. The creature curses the barbarian human upon realizing its plans for conquest were ruined in that battle. Wolfgang points his glowing hammer and demands that the creature reveal the whereabouts of the sovereign of demons. What's left of the monster's essence desperately flees toward the underground, trying to save its own life. The demon crawls away, humiliated for being defeated so overwhelmingly by a simple human hunter. Wolfgang delivers a final blow with his electricity-charged hammer, demanding that it answer. The impact crushes the monster's remains in a terrible explosion of golden light that eliminates the demon's essence. The dust settles, revealing the destroyed and silent scene of the parking lot after the violent battle has ended. Jin Woo runs desperately to help his father, who has returned to normal, but is unconscious on the parking lot floor. Wolfgang laments with frustration for having eliminated the creature without getting any clue to his target's whereabouts. The warrior glances sideways with a serious expression, feeling that the real danger is still lurking. The huge rift opened in the parking lot floor continues to emanate a sinister energy under the revered light of the moon. Suddenly, a woman's high-heeled boot steps elegantly on the destroyed ground, announcing someone's arrival. Vice President of the Hunter Association takes control of the situation, ordering the elimination of the remaining beasts. Under her orders, a team of elite hunters advances to combat and subdue the surviving monsters on the street. Choi-un walks imposingly amidst the destroyed scenery and approaches the powerful barbarian warrior. Wolfgang stares at her suspiciously and directly questions who she is and what her role is in this situation. The vice president formally introduces herself to the warrior and guarantees that her subordinates will clean up the remaining beasts. She offers cooperation and invites him to the association. He wants clues about the feared Devil House. Meanwhile, the scene shows the gigantic and imposing corporate building where the Hunter Association headquarters is located. Wolfgang is taken to a luxurious office, where the institution's president awaits him patiently to talk. Lee Jung-won extends his hand cordially and introduces himself as the president of the influential Hunter Association. Two strong hunters shake hands cordially while silently sizing each other up at the top of the skyscraper. The president is impressed by the absurd physique and overwhelming mystical energy emanating from the mysterious barbarian. Wolfgang asks to get straight to the point, and the president agrees to immediately reveal the secrets he possesses. Lee Jung-won reveals that the demonic Sovereign Devil House is hidden in a dangerous underworld called Underhell. Wolfgang is extremely surprised and attentive upon hearing the name of that mysterious underground abyss for the first time. The president explains that the demons created that refuge deep within the earth to protect themselves from the sunlight. The barbarian rudely interrupts him, demanding to know only the exact location of the entrance to the underworld. Lee Jung-won changes his tone and recalls the recent troubles involving the warrior, including the promotion test. He recounts the Slime King's escape and accuses the barbarian of being constantly involved in catastrophic incidents. The man mentions the hellhound Cerberus and questions the incredible coincidence of so many demons crossing his path. The president recalls that the hero even defeated the feared cleaner and demands real explanations about his past. He points out that Wolfgang survived the demon Ombrax unscathed, questions the true motives behind his actions. The president suspects that the sudden appearance of a hunter without a divine contract is a setup by the demons themselves. Lee Jung-won draws his battle fan and warns that he will need to test the barbarian's real skills and intentions. The president invokes the power of his protective constellation, raising a magnificent spiritual altar in the hall. The immense and divine figure of Dangun Wangjum materializes behind the president, emanating a powerful blue energy. Wolfgang remains completely calm and questions if the man is implying that he is an ally of the demons. The man smiles and denies the accusation, claiming he only wishes to personally test the mysterious warrior's limits. The president swings the mystical fan and conjures a hurricane of green wind that completely envelopes the barbarian's body. Choi-eun, who watches the duel with admiration, eagerly awaiting the result of her boss's power demonstration. She thinks about the danger the barbarian represents and is completely charmed by her president's elegant posture. The storm of leaves and wind ceases, revealing the end of the confrontation, and the vice president asks if the test is over. To everyone's surprise, the barbarian moves at an imperceptible speed and breaks the mystical technique in an instant. The president falls to his knees, gravely injured, leaving his assistant in complete shock upon seeing her leader defeated. Wolfgang approaches the fallen man and comments coldly that the association's leader is disappointingly weak. Offended, the vice president demands respect and shouts that the man is the most powerful hunter in all of Korea. The barbarian warrior retorts with disdain, stating that he only points out the weakness of those who cannot fight. Extremely irritated by the barbarian's insolence, the woman clenches her teeth, overcome by a deep and uncontrollable hatred. Choi-eun summons the power of her own divine constellation, which manifests as a beautiful and imposing empress. The president tries to restrain his assistant, desperately shouting for her not to attack the mysterious barbarian warrior. Ignoring the warning, the woman orders her divine entity to use a powerful magic of seduction and domination against the hero. The beautiful spiritual goddess embraces Wolfgang, trying to seal his movements and dominate his mind with a mystical kiss. The vice president scoffs at the warrior, claiming he is nothing but an insignificant human before her spell. To the president's astonishment, the domination spell fails miserably, and Wolfgang remains standing without suffering any harm. Realizing the imminent danger, the association leader shouts desperately, warning the woman about the counterattack. She turns, startled, but is surprised by the barbarian's colossal fist, which relentlessly advances toward her face. The president watches the scene in complete panic and swallows hard, foreseeing the violent outcome of that brutal blow. The vice president is sent flying and falls unconscious on the destroyed floor of the luxurious presidential office. Wolfgang faces the defeated president and coldly demands that he hand over all information about Underhell. Somewhere underground, an immense dark castle surrounded by rivers of burning lava emerges amidst the darkness. On the third floor of Underhell, a feared and monstrous demon lord waits patiently on its throne of thorns. The small demon lord Ombrax walks to an infernal fortress and asks his old friend for a favor. The demon lord on the throne retorts with disdain, asking since when they became friends. Ombrax tries to smooth things over and asks if the Dark Lord is still holding on to past grudges. The Lord angrily remembers that he lost his entire army and his own territory to him 1,000 years ago. Trying to save himself, Ombrax offers a valuable piece of gossip about a barbarian on the surface who is hunting demons. Upon hearing about the terrible threat on the surface, the demon lord reacts immediately, changing his posture. He agrees to help his colleague due to his pathetic state and deduces that he wants free passage back home. Ombrax runs off laughing with happiness, and the Lord even promises to help him descend to the deeper floors of the underworld. The Lord extends his hand to grab the little monster and repeats thoughtfully about the idea of descending further into the underworld. A terrible purple energy begins to surge from his hand, leaving the small demon desperate as it notices the trap. The Lord conjures a spell of absolute petrification and begins to turn Ombrax into a living stone statue. The dark demon lets out a malicious laugh as he savors his cruel revenge against his old rival. He laughs loudly, calling the little one a fool for actually believing the word of a lying demon. The Lord mercilessly throws his statue away and comments that this whole situation is pitiful. Ombrax's stone body rolls over a gigantic pile of bones and mortal remains on the dungeon floor. He ends up falling, motionless and defenseless, in the middle of that macabre dump of monsters defeated by the castle lord. But suddenly, a monstrous hand emerges from the darkness in the middle of that pile of decomposing bodies. A sinister reddish glow begins to emanate from that mountain, revealing a sword stuck in the place. Ignoring the situation, the underworld lord turns his attention to another being and realizes it is still alive. Veins pop on his head in anger as he rages furiously against the cursed barbarian warrior from the surface. Back in the luxury office, Wolfgang warns that they are not strong enough to face the real demons. The president says he is one of the strongest in Korea, and Wolfgang decides he will have to descend into the underworld alone. The president tries to calm the barbarian, claiming that the demon's appearance was just a rare anomaly. Wolfgang looks through the skyscraper's glass window and immediately realizes something is very wrong. He questions why the gloomy sky remains dark even after the previous monster's defeat. Suddenly, a violent tremor shakes the entire building's structure and startles the president of the Hunter Association. The barbarian warrior's eyes widen as he feels an overwhelming spiritual pressure coming from outside. An immense column of flames and lava destroys buildings in the middle of the city, causing widespread panic. The gigantic demon Volcalas, made purely of lava and flames, materializes in the middle of downtown Seoul. Another winged monster called the Demon Batwing appears, spreading terror in the Daejeon region at the same time. To make matters worse, the terrible demoness Astaroth also makes her triumphant appearance in the territory of Paju City. The trail of destruction from the demon Volcalas begins to consume the downtown streets with rivers of boiling lava. Meanwhile, the bat monster flies over the city of Daejeon, destroying everything with its sharp claws. And in Paju, the demoness smiles sadistically, ready to begin her own banquet of blood and chaos. The president is completely desperate, and Wolfgang coldly confirms that the demons have begun their attack. Without hesitation, the barbarian shatters the skyscraper's armored glass and jumps into a free fall toward the battle. In mid-air, he draws his gigantic weapon, concentrating a powerful, bright energy around it. He hits the ground with a destructive impact, opening a crater on top of a residential building. Wolfgang quickly leaps between the rooftops, wondering how the demons appeared so fast. Upon landing, the warrior wonders if the feared demonic invasion of the human world has finally begun again. He quickens his pace in a hurry, realizing the gravity of the situation humanity is in. At the top of the skyscraper, the president is in disbelief as he sees the barbarian jump directly from the 75th floor. He regrets having fought with someone so insane and decides to send his team to follow the barbarian immediately. 10 minutes before this, on the property of the Blue Dragon family in Paju, some warriors were training hard. The family's young successor, Go-Yuna, finishes her spear movements. Taking a deep breath after the physical exertion, she executes an impressive spinning kick in the air, demonstrating an impeccable martial arts technique. With a precise and powerful blow from her spear, the warrior completely destroys the wooden training dummy. Even so, Yuna is not satisfied and mutters to herself that she still needs to get much stronger than this. She remembers the gossip about her family's fame and tells herself not to get distracted by others' praise. Yuna recalls the moment of her divine choosing when she made a provisional contract with a great constellation. Yuna sees system messages informing her that the constellation was disappointed and canceled the provisional contract with her. She grips her training hilt, vowing to train even harder so as not to miss the next chance she gets. Breathing heavily, the young woman notices that her hand is badly injured and bleeding from overexertion. Her father enters, applauding the training proudly, and says he will soon be able to pass on the leadership of the Blue Dragon family. The senior level hunter Go Sangyeong begins to cry with emotion, leaving his daughter embarrassed by his drama. Yuna asks him to stop the drama and confesses that she still needs to regain her constellation's recognition. He cries even louder, admiring the girl's maturity, while she desperately shouts for him to control himself. The man suddenly becomes serious upon hearing strange noises coming from outside the training temple. Father and daughter are surprised by a deafening explosion that makes the ground shake violently. The family leader immediately jumps into the central courtyard, followed closely by his armed daughter. The young warrior is paralyzed with complete panic as she looks up and sees the terrible invading figure. Floating amidst a torrent of flames, the powerful demoness Astaroth appears, hovering above their property. Go Sung-yong recognizes the evil energy and swallows hard, realizing the gravity of the situation they are in. He draws his immense sacred spear and urgently orders his daughter to go inside the temple and call the Hunter Association. The terrible creature demands to know where the so-called Barbarian is while emanating a dark and oppressive aura over the courtyard. The Lord Devil House had ordered his 3 main servants to go to the surface to hunt the warrior. The flame demon questioned how they would track the human with only the description of Barbarian. The Lord explained, smiling, that it would be easy because he is a brainless fool who charges forward swinging a giant weapon. The fire monster Volcalas doubted there was any human crazy enough to attack him head-on in Seoul. He lets out a monstrous roar, summoning his burning flames to scorch everything in his path. At that exact moment, Wolfgang appears, running across the roof of a building, shouting and charging with his colossal sword. The lava demon is surprised and realizes his master's description of the barbarian was absurdly precise. Wolfgang jumps from above, delivering a furious blow with his sword, and shouts, asking how he dares to invade the city. Suddenly, the terrible demon Batwing appears, laughing loudly, ready to steal the reward and the target from his ally. He attacks at high speed, grabbing the barbarian with his claws and dragging him away into the air. Back at the temple, the leader Go Sangyeong's huge spear is broken, and he falls defeated on the ground before the demoness. The hunter gasps, devastated to realize that even as a rank S, he was completely humbled by his rival. Astaroth holds his neck with her sharp claws and orders him to tell her everything he knows about the barbarian hero. Upon hearing his refusal, she begins to choke the warrior mercilessly, making him scream in agonizing pain. Yuna returns to the courtyard, running after managing to notify the Hunter Association about the terrible invasion. She falls into absolute despair upon seeing her beloved father being tormented and suffocated by the hands of that creature. The girl tries to scream for him, but her voice simply fails, due to the immense shock of seeing that brutal scene. The demoness notices Yuna's approach and gives a sadistic smile, revealing her pointed fangs and red eyes. Trembling and overcome with dread, the young woman whispers to herself, trying to find the strength to act in that moment. She questions if she could help without a constellation and fears her action will only result in a pointless end. Her hands tremble uncontrollably as she thinks that her body is too exhausted from training and that there is no way to defeat her rival. Overcome by cowardice, Yuna considers if it wouldn't be better to just hide and wait for the other hunters to arrive. She looks again at her father, who is about to be suffocated under the merciless grip of that creature. The image of her father on the brink of passing away awakens something deep in her mind, erasing any doubt she had. Even while suffering, the warrior gives a faint smile to calm his beloved daughter and prevent her from sacrificing herself. Upon hearing his last words of farewell, the young warrior feels a painful tightness in her chest. Astaroth completely loses her patience with the human and begins to squeeze his neck to end his life for good. In the blink of an eye, an immense torrent of blue energy surges as Yuna charges forward, delivering a spear strike. The demoness is shocked and turns, startled by the incredible speed of the girl's sudden attack. The young hunter screams with all her might, releasing all the accumulated fury in her heart in that attack. The precise cut of her spear strikes the demoness head on, creating an extremely bright blue mystical flash. Astaroth is forced to cross her arms to defend herself, but the impact of the mystical blow still throws her back with force. Yuna lands as elegantly on the temple stone floor, positioning herself firmly to protect her fallen father. She wields her mystical weapon with both hands, facing the enemy with an unshakable determination in her eyes. Coughing heavily, the injured warrior begs her to retreat, warning that this opponent is on another level. Yuna refuses her father's request to retreat and says firmly that she will face the terrible opponent from now on. The young warrior remembers she promised herself never to falter in the face of danger or freeze in fear again. She vowed that if she got a new chance, she would make the most of it without running away like a scared coward. Yuna tells herself she needs to stop looking for silly excuses to simply give up on this battle. The girl's injured hand, which was previously trembling uncontrollably, begins to steady on the hilt of her spear. She clenches her fist with unbelievable strength, promising never again to let her beloved father suffer like this. A divine, shimmering blue glow explodes around her, illuminating the entire destroyed courtyard of the Blue Dragon clan. The Lancer of the Blue Rose constellation is amazed by the young warrior's shackable determination under pressure. Surprised, she sees the divine message offering an official and definitive contract proposal from her constellation. A huge amount of mana and spiritual energy envelopes the body of the renowned family's legitimate successor. Yuna accepts the contract and invokes the soul of Joan of Arc, vowing never to falter before any monster again. Astaroth rages, irritated that she made the mystical contract, and promises to finish the girl off once and for all. Without showing any sign of fear, Yuna spins her mystical spear, concentrating the immense spiritual power at its tip. The young woman uses a special technique of walking on water, spectacularly multiplying her speed. The demoness's eyes widen, completely stunned by losing track of the human's movements amidst that speed. In the air, the girl executes the piercing spear blow, descending with destructive force toward the rival's head. The mystical attack pierces Astaroth's chest, releasing a colossal discharge of sacred energy into her body. Back to the fight in Seoul, the barbarian hero continues his frantic duel against the colossal flame demon Volcalis. The winged monster Batwing tries to interfere in the middle of the duel to capture the hero and secure his lord's reward. He advances with his sharp claws, capturing the barbarian and carrying him into the skies at high speed. But Wolfgang fights back violently, delivering an absurd sword blow that cuts off the creature's limbs in mid-air. The colossal impact of the blow makes the demons plummet and destroy the street, creating an immense shockwave. The vice president of the association's car skids on the road as it tries to dodge all that mass destruction. Choi Yun gets out of the vehicle, horrified, and wonders how it was possible for the demons to invade without any prior sign. The fire monster Vocalus Re emerges from the rebel, roaring furiously, determined to eliminate everyone present. But Wolfgang gives the monster no time to breathe and launches himself again at high speed toward its chest. The barbarian warrior lets out a savage battle cry, his eyes glowing with pure fury and thirst for battle. With a single, brutal movement of his colossal sword, he cuts the gigantic fire demon right down the middle of its body. Ian, who watches it all, trembling in total panic, not knowing what to do in the face of that absurd display of power. The colossal lava monster's split body crumbles over the destroyed buildings, spreading dust throughout Seoul. The gigantic creature is finally defeated, exploding into thousands of pieces of ash and fire that slowly extinguish. Several heavy pieces of debris plummet from the sky and crush the vice president's vehicle, leaving the woman in complete despair. Wolfgang lands abruptly right behind her, startling in, high and making her apologize for her previous behavior. The warrior questions her for following him, being so weak, and she explains she came to update him on the simultaneous attacks. She opens a holographic virtual map to show the exact areas of attack by the demonic hordes in the country. She details that there are active threats happening in Seoul and Paju, and also one a bit further away in Daejeon. Wolfgang praises their tracking system, admitting that the exact information will be crucial for the upcoming battles. He demands to know the best place for him to go next, but the assistant is speechless under the pressure. In the underworld, the Lord Devil House feels Vocalis's demise and is furious that he didn't lure the target to Underhell. He smiles, remembering there are still 2 servants left and that the Barbarian will lose his strength in the eternal darkness of Underhell. Back at the Blue Dragon clan, Yuna's mystical spear continues to glow intensely against the demoness's chest. Astaroth screams in extreme pain, her face burned by sacred energy, not understanding how a mere human has so much power. Yuna realizes she has truly injured the monster and decides to focus all her remaining energy on one more attack. She charges forward swiftly, delivering a new piercing blow of divine energy that illuminates the entire temple area. A spectacular detonation shakes the courtyard, covering the entire property in a dense and mysterious cloud of smoke. As the smoke begins to clear, the cracked ground reveals the demoness Astaroth, quite breathless and on her knees in the courtyard. Yuna takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of exhaustion, but celebrates upon seeing that her blow managed to injure the terrible opponent. Extremely furious with the attack, the horned demoness roars with hatred, calling the human hunter an insolent worm. The creature's wings expand frighteningly as she summons a black mass of evil power in her claws. Yuna's eyes widen, extremely scared by the immense change in the spiritual pressure of that terrible opponent. The demoness recognizes the girl's power and decides to fight with everything, revealing her true and monstrous physical form. She transforms into a colossal and hideous creature with gigantic wings and claws ready to shred Yuna. Yuna is completely in disbelief and desperately wonders how it would be possible to defeat that apocalyptic monster. The terrible beast attacks without hesitation, delivering a devastating blow with its pointed tail toward the young woman. Yuna defends herself as best she can, using the hilt of her mystical spear to block the brutal impact of that tail attack. The pressure of the blow is so strong that it makes the warrior's arms tremble and almost give way under the immense physical weight. With a bestial roar, the monster uses its additional claws to push the girl against the stone structures. The hunter realizes she won't have time to dodge the next mortal blow coming her way. But suddenly, ropes of bright energy appear out of nowhere and completely envelop the monster's colossal body. Several spiritual warriors in traditional robes appear, holding the tethers to pin the demon to the ground. Completely immobilized, the beast roars in frustration, trying to understand who is responsible for that sealing spell. A mysterious man in a white robe and hat approaches, claiming he came there to apprehend that evil creature. He introduces himself as Kim Junhan, a rank C hunter who came to sign a contract and happened to spot the invasion. Yuna warns that it's too dangerous for him, but the man explains that his constellation gets stronger against evil beings. The power of the mystical royal seal amplifies, crushing the demon's strength as it tries to fight against the technique. Junhan shouts, giving the signal for the counterattack, and Yuna seizes the perfect chance, leaping with her spear in hand. Using her secret mystical ability, she concentrates all the constellation's remaining power to deliver the final blow. She charges forward with absolute determination and shouts that this is the definitive end for the terrible invading creature. The demon's eyes widen as it sees the glowing tip of the sacred spear relentlessly approaching its chest. But sadistically, the creature gives a bizarre smile, revealing that this approach was exactly what she wanted. The crystal on its chest glows intensely, firing several sharp stakes of dark energy toward the girl. Junhan becomes desperate upon realizing his spiritual summons won't have time to defend her from the impact. Yuna just widens her eyes, frozen, as essence violently sprays amidst the sudden attack. At the last second, her father throws himself in front of the stakes, begging his constellation for the power to save her. The mystical Lancer constellation accepts the sacrifice and the final wish determination from the hunter Go Seong-yang. The mystical entity deeply laments the imminent demise of its loyal contractor while granting his final request. Spiritual blue flames envelop his body, granting him the ultimate divine authority to protect his family. The secret power consumes all the warrior's life force, giving him an energy that surpasses human limits. The hero tears through the air, delivering an insane sequence of spear strikes that destroy the monster's dark claws. Yuna watches it all in complete shock as his essence spurts before her eyes amidst the brutal combat. Go Sanjung says goodbye with a loving look and a faint smile, telling his daughter to stay safe and live. The legendary warrior uses the rest of his strength and launches himself like a blue meteor toward the demon's crystal. A devastating explosion of purifying blue light consumes the entire courtyard, creating a spectacular mystical flash. Junhan runs to the young woman amidst the thick smoke of the great explosion, asking worriedly if she is okay. Completely dazed and with tears in her eyes, she whispers, calling for her beloved father in the hope of seeing him. The manager holds her firmly, warning that it's still too dangerous to advance before the smoke clears completely. Both freeze in terror upon hearing the demon's dreadful voice echoing from within the dense curtain of dust and ash. Astery emerges, alive from the shadows, revealing with a loud laugh that the weak human's sacrifice was not enough. The monstrous creature raises its sharp claw, vowing to crush them all before going after its target. She opens her maw full of pointed teeth, ready to devour them without giving any chance for defense or escape. However, the demoness suddenly stops her attack and trembles with fear upon sensing an overwhelming presence approaching. The temple's ceiling is shattered by a figure at high speed, causing a new explosion of earth and stones in the courtyard. Amidst the dust, Wolfgang appears, emanating a destructive aura so absurd that it makes the monster retreat immediately. Astaroth tries to come up with an escape plan to lure the hero to the underworld, where her Lord Devil House can defeat him. But before she can say a word, the barbarian's colossal fist brutally smashes her face. Wolfgang stands imposingly before the crater, while the survivors look at their savior in disbelief. The warrior, cold and imposing, warns that he has no patience and doesn't listen to proposals from filthy demons. Meanwhile, in the city of Daeon, the destruction is total after the terrible attack of the flying demon Batwing. The demon Batwing ends up being brutally defeated, falling lifeless to the ground, covered in arrows of divine light. A mysterious person in white kneels on the cobblestone ground, panting. After unleashing all their power, the rank-as hunter Kim Hyun, under the heavy rain, asks herself exhaustedly if they have finally won.